Led by a slender youth, the rain landed on his clothes and made his hair wet, but he stood there as still as a statue who looked at the mountain with deep thoughts. After a moment, in a place somewhere below the mountain, there was an abrupt small bloom of fireworks. It was said to be fireworks, but it was more like a small flare that disappeared very fast, and in a short moment it scattered around. The youth turned around and one was unable to hear the waves in the tone. The matter is completed. Young master is injured. The middle-aged man beside him frowned. He lowered his head and looked at the fresh knife wounds on his arms. Just now the incense was targeted for males, and once inhaled one would lose all rational thought and become crazy. It was not that effective on females, thus that girl escaped. Even though his rationality exceeds normal range, but he was not a saint, and fearing that an accident would arise, he could only use this method to keep himself awake. Talk after returning. Young master. The middle-aged man had some hesitation as he continued speaking. That young lady from the Shen family had seen. Tai Yu, I do not need to take any actions against a little girl. The youth's beautiful peach-colored eyes flashed and his voice tone got cold. That person seemed to fear him, and after some thinking he could muster his courage and said, but the Shen family would perhaps know. The Shen family do not know. The youth coldly said, the Shen family are all stupids, and it is with difficulty that there is a smart one. As if he had thought about something, he smiled. What a pity. The middle-aged man moved his lips, but he finally did not speak. Leave. Almost at the same time at the northern pavilion. At the adjacent of the house, Ren Wanyan sat in front of the table. She only lit a small lamp and the flame was clearly fluttering like her heart. Xianglan said, Furin, it is already the third of the 5 night watch periods, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Do rest. Ren Wanyan shook her head and her face revealed some irritation. Cannot sleep. She did not know what she heard that made her felt some uneasiness, and she did not know from where did it come from. Moreover, Gui Momo had already said that everything went smoothly. Furthermore, she herself left the courtyard and could hear the noise coming out from the innermost room. In the raining night, one could roughly hear things but could hear the struggles and crying voice of a female. Even though one could not tell who it was, but the mournful and tragic sounds were very clear. Ren Wanyan blushed and her heartbeat increased, but she could not help but be frightened. The rumors of the many methods Prince Yu used while playing with females were plentiful, and apparently it seems that they were true. It would be assumed that Shen Miao must have gone through some torture. Even though there was some fear in her heart, but in the fear, happiness bloomed out. In the 3 Shen households, Shen Miao relied on Shen Qin, and thus no matter what happened outside, one would first look at Shen Miao. Shen Yu was a well-known talent in the capital and only Shen Qing was slightly mediocre. But she still had a son, and since Shen Chu followed Shen Qin, naturally he would inevitably be competing with Shen Yuanbo for the family property. However, was not Shen Miao still being played with? And after her eldest Cao, that had eyes on top, knew that her daughter had committed such a filthy scandal, would she still protect Shen Miao? Or would she give Shen Miao a piece of white silk? With such a though, Ren Wanyan's frenetic mind calmed down a little. She looked at the skies. I will rest just a little while. Xianglan and Kaiju saw that she was finally willing to rest and could not help but feel happy. They quickly supported Ren Wanyan to lay on the bed before saying, Furin must rest as there is more excitement tomorrow. Indeed, Ren Wanyan murmured, there is more excitement tomorrow. After all, that exciting act tomorrow had to wait for her to personally bring it to an end. This rain kept falling for the entire night. In the quiet forest, the rain finally rested. Everything was withered, but it was cooler after the autumn rain. The air was filled with a moist aroma, and early in the morning the monks in the temple started to ring the bell. The dull sounds of the bell awakened the person who was sound asleep. Ren Wanyan opened her eyes. She could not sleep peacefully the entire night as she kept having nightmares and finally fell asleep near dawn. When she woke up, her forehead was filled with sweat. Furin is awake. Xianglan went up to wipe one's face. After Ren Wanyan washed up, she took a look outside. The peace was restored after the rain and the birds were cheerfully singing away. She smiled, changed to a set of brighter clothing, and also take out that ruby inlaid turquoise flower. Currently she was at her middle age and had long accustomed to wear dark clothes, and it was rare that she would personally chose brighter clothes to wear. Kaiju smiled. Furin mood is indeed good, and to wear such a bright color, one's spirits will be much higher. Ren Wanyan looked at the mirror and smiled in satisfaction. Naturally she felt good. It could be said that she was in a cheerful mood and high spirits. When everything was ready, she said, let us go. It is time to call my tired niece out to eat. The northern pavilion was the deepest and was so quiet that there was not a single maid. When Ren Wanyan saw it, her gaze was filled with satisfaction. It was assumed that Prince Yu had handled matters very well, that the maids were sent away. If it was not that she was afraid the incident would be looked into, she could not wait to declare to the world immediately of what had happened inside. Because of the consequences, she could only suppress herself. Go and knock the door, she said to Xianglan, and a glimpse of revulsion flashed across her eyes. She also looked down on females who had soiled their bodies, but she had forgotten who was the one who initiated the plan to turn Shen Miao to that. 5th young lady, Xianglan walked to the door and knocked. 2nd Furin is here. There was no movement inside, as if there was no one at all. 5th young lady, 2nd Furin is here, Xianglan continued saying. But after knocking for a long time, they did not hear anyone answering. Ren Wanyan sighed and smiled. This 5th lady is really a child at heart. The skies are already bright, but she is still lazing around. It would not be good to delay the timing of the prayers. Let me do it then. She then walked to the front of the door and gently knocked before softly speaking, 5th lady, it is time to wake up and have a meal. After the meal we still need to pray. One must not be willful. No one inside answered her words. Ren Wanyan turned over and was somewhat helpless. She did not know how to explain to herself or others and softly said, forget it. Just directly push the door open and enter. 5th lady's maids are also not matured enough. Upon return, one must be sure to punish them. As she spoke, she wanted to push the door open and enter. 2nd Shen. A fluttering light voice sounded in the silence. Ren Wanyan was surprised and thought that the voice came from the inside of the room, but heard Xianglan and Kaiju speaking, 5th young lady. 2nd young lady. She then turned around in surprise. She saw Shen Yu standing together with Shen Miao. Today Shen Miao wore an all-white silk dress and covered with a white peony designed cloak. At first glance, it was as if she was showing filial piety. After getting used to seeing Shen Miao wearing bright red and green and wearing rustic clothes, this plain attire was simply elegant. Coupled with her slightly cold expression, it had a somewhat moving feeling. There was a flash of jealousy in Shen Yu's eyes. She did not know when this idiotic Tangmei's appearance had improved, but did not think that the original Shen Miao's looks were actually not bad. It was only because she was deliberately dressed with a vulgar appearance. Now that her temperament has changed and coupled with her appearance, it was naturally not the same as before. Ren Wanyan was also dazzled by Shen Miao's dressing. She frowned as she said, why is 5th lady dressed so inauspiciously? This white and plain, if one did not know better one would think that there is bereavement in our family. 2nd Shen however wore very brightly. Shen Miao said with a smile. Ren Wanyan looked at her own clothes and suddenly remembered something before carefully sizing Shen Miao. She did not know how Shen Miao came back from outside and still had a look of calm. But she could bluff the others but not her on the happenings of yesterday night. She had the intention to confirm it, so she walked up to Shen Miao and pulled Shen Miao's arms as she asked caringly, "Did fifth lady slept well last night?" Thanking second Shen's attention, the sleep was not bad. Shen Miao smiled. Ren Wanyan carefully observed Shen Miao's expression and saw that her gestures were not fake before alarms rang in her heart. Since when did this Shen Miao become this capable without anyone knowing? When normal females meet with such matter, would not they lament to heavens and not their heads on the earth? How could she be this calm? Could it be possible that it was an act? She clearly heard the miserable cries last night. Looking at Shen Miao's pair of clear eyes, a sense of anxiety suddenly rose from Ren Wanyan's heart and this anxiety made her confused. She smiled as she went forward to Shen Miao and said, "I will be at ease since fifth lady slept well." After the first glance she discovered that Shen Miao's neck was as fair as jade. She was born with a fair complexion and at this moment it was as if it was a jade, without a single flaw, not to mention any injuries. This was not possible. The means of how Prince Yu played with women had always been brutal. How could there not be a trace of it on Shen Miao? Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao then looked at Ren Wanyan. She felt that something most likely had happened but she did not know what went on. Ren Wanyan's uneasiness grew bigger and bigger. She grabbed Shen Miao's hands and pulled as she was speaking like usual. "The weather is really cold. Is not fifth lady not cold from this thin attire?" As she spoke, Ren Wanyan suddenly pulled Shen Miao's sleeves up. When the white sleeves was suddenly pulled up, it revealed a fair wrist. Her arms were fair and clean as if it was a high-grade mud and jade, without a single flaw. Ren Wanyan stood blankly on the spot as Shen Miao pulled her arm back and smiled. Second Shen seemed to be checking on something. "No," Ren Wanyan forced a smile, "just now. My hand slipped." Her heart was somewhat in a trance and did not know what expression to show. How could there not be an injury on Shen Miao's body? She was also someone who went through it, not to talk about Prince Yu type of person, even it was a normal male, and there would also be some marks that would be left on the female's body. Could it be that Prince Yu did not do it superficially? But Shen Miao's current expression was not like someone who had suffered many blows. But Shen Miao maintained the appearance as though nothing had happened. How to bring the matter out to the open? Her eyes swept around the surrounding and only saw Shen Yu's Huang Ying and Qing Luan but did not see Shen Miao's Jing Jie and Gu Yu. Her eyes turned and she said, "Where did the two maids beside fifth lady had gone to? Disappear so early in the morning. I have let them go bring some porridge over this morning. Woke up early this morning and felt some discomfort at my throat. The kitchens are far away from here." Ren Wanyan smiled. This child, just say directly would do. But is not the kitchens at the southern pavilion? Yes. Shen Miao looked at her. "I came over from the southern pavilion." "What nonsense are you saying to second Shen?" Ren Wanyan smiled. "Did you not stay at northern pavilion last night?" Her words hardly landed when she saw a smile bursting on Shen Miao's face. After she woke up from the fall into the water, her expression was very cold and most of the time it would be a slight smile but the smile now seemed to be from her heart which was very brilliant but she did not know why it made others feel cold. Ren Wanyan's heart sank down like lead sinking down. "Furin, it is bad." Young lady disappeared. With the panic shouts from the female, everyone's eyes landed on the two maids' anxious expressions. It was not someone else but Shen Qing's Yanmei and Shui Bai. "What did you say?" Ren Wanyan suddenly screamed. Shen Yu was slightly surprised for a moment. Shen Qing actually disappeared. She sneaked a look at Shen Miao and the latter expression was leveled and calm as if what was heard was only greeting words. How can Qing disappear? Ren Wanyan grabbed Yanmei's collar as she looked viciously at her like a mother beast. "Oh, this I know." Shen Miao suddenly spoke. Everyone's eyes landed on her. In a blanket of silence, Shen Miao lightly smiled. "I just came over from the southern pavilion." "Why so?" "It was naturally because I was resting in the southern pavilion. Yesterday night, I really could not sleep so I went to look for eldest sister, hoping to be able to exchange the room with her." Eldest sister agreed. Most likely she felt that she would have a peace of mind with second Shen by the next door. This morning upon leaving the room, this one met second older sister and came over with her. Thought of coming over to thank eldest sister as she was so considerate with me in exchanging rooms. With every word she said, Ren Wanyan's heart sank a little. Towards the end, the desperation was too overwhelming and her cheeks were slightly trembling as her eyes turned red as if she was a manic animal. Seeing Ren Wanyan like so, Shen Yu was somewhat afraid. She most probably had guessed that a major event had occurred but seeing the second household that had always opposed her mother landed in such a situation, naturally she was gloating and followed Shen Miao words, "Yes. Early this morning, it was I who saw fifth younger sister walking out from the room next door and at that moment came over to have the meal with younger sister." Shen Miao's voice was as light as a feather but was like a heavy mallet hammering into Ren Wanyan's heart, hurting it so badly that she almost spit out blood. "The person who rested here last night was not me. It was eldest sister." Ren Wanyan clutched her heart and took 2 steps back. She looked like she almost fainted onto the ground. The person who was resting here last night was not Shen Miao, but was Shen Qing. So that meant that the woman that Prince Yu was playing with was her Qing. Those miserable and mournful cries were all from her Qing. She was just next door and was only separated by a wall with her daughter, but her daughter was insulted. How could she be able to accept it? This entire thing must be false. This was not possible. Ren Wanyan's heart was almost minced as she looked at that closed door. In a split moment, she did not have the courage to open it. She dare not think and see what kind of tragedy it would be inside. Feeling the skies and earth were spinning, she still remembered not to let Shen Yu and Shen Miao see what was inside as if it was spread out, She could barely force out a smile that looked uglier than crying. "You all head back first. I just asked and Qing was still sleeping. Let's not wait for her." Shen Miao smiled. Second Shen really know how to joke. Just now you do not even know eldest sister was resting inside and now you said that you have spoken to eldest sister. Could it be that eldest sister is hiding something privately? No, Ren Wanyan flatly denied it and when these actions fall into Shen Yu's eyes, she felt more awed. Shen Miao's eyes moved but shouted at an approaching figure, "Gui Momo. Need to trouble you to help second Shen to open this door." Gui Momo bent her back as she walked over. Today she was also told to come over early and was not clear to the scene that was in front of her. Hearing Shen Miao speaking like that, she thought that Shen Miao had already spoken to Ren Wanyan and also felt somewhat guilty in her heart. Gui Momo did not see Ren Wanyan's facial expression and did not see that it was at the moment was like the color of soil. Because Gui Momo was nearer to that door, Ren Wanyan was unable to block it. They heard a jia sound as the door was slowly pushed open. Every single thing was almost silent. An intriguing smell quickly spread from the door. The door slowly opened but no one went up to look. The guest rooms in Wolong Temple were rather empty and were not as gorgeous as one's own house, coupled that this was a specially selected room, it was even more spacious. The bed was in the middle of the room and there was not even a screen cover blocking it. Thus because of that, everyone was able to see how the room was. Shen Yu was the first one who screamed. Seeing the clothes scattered on the ground, they were really ripped into pieces and the blanket on the bed was thrown aside casually, and all the books on the table were swept onto the ground. The tea set was smashed into pieces as if it had experienced a catastrophe. But the most surprising thing was not this. The female on the bed laid in disarray. She was almost not covered by the quilt and just half laid on the side of the bed and with her back facing out. There were red bite parts with some bloodstains and bruises which shocked one's eyes and astonished one's heart. There was also a bloodstained whip under the bed that was split in two. Looking back at that traces on the female's body, one would know that the whip was used to cause those injuries. Heavens! Shen Yu clutched her mouth and stepped backwards. Who is that? It is not eldest sister, right? She suddenly turned and looked at Ren Wanyan. Since Shen Miao had said that she and Shen Qing had switched rooms, so at this moment the person who was supposed to be in the room should be Shen Qing. But from what everything in front had indicated, Shen Qing had met with a mishap. Even though Shen Yu was an unmarried female, she knew that this scene was obviously traces of a female being defiled. Gui Momo also did not expect that there was someone in the room. When Shen Miao spoke just now, she thought that Shen Miao had already spoken to Ren Wanyu and only wanted to go into the room to continue. As a result, when she opened the door and saw that there was a female, she was surprised. Could it be that there was another female that was also been played by Prince Yu last night? If that were so, then she had mucked up the job. But Shen Yu's words made her soul fly and scattered away. Shen Qing, the female laying there was Shen Qing. When Yan Mei and Shui Bai saw Shen Qing like this, their hearts practically chilled. For such a thing to happen to their own young lady, there would not be a living road left for them. Both of them looked at each other and saw the despair in one another's eyes before going down on their knees accordingly and kowtow continuously to Ren Wanyan. Ren Wanyan stood staring blankly at the scene. Second Shen, do not let one go up and see. In the silence, Shen Miao softly opened her mouth. Her tone was calm, as if she had not seen this scene of tragedy. Ren Wanyan tilted her head and saw that young girl looking at her quietly. Her chest was thumping as though it was in a perilous situation, but she still continued to quickly walk into the room with a pale face before half kneeling to the female at the bed. The female's hair was disheveled and there were many fallen hairs on the floor, which was apparently ripped out by someone. Ren Wanyan's hand reached out trembling and turned the female over. A rumbling sound was heard, as if it was reflecting her mood. The curtain of rain that had stopped suddenly returned. In the heap of dark clouds, thunder was heard by everyone. Ren Wanyan closed her eyes painfully. The female in her arms was Shen Qing. The more one looked closer, the more shock one felt. Shen Qing's face was swollen. Apparently the abuse was not light at all. And based on looking at her body, there was no clean area that was unharmed. And one of her hands was soft and folded into a strange posture. It actually seemed broken. Prince Yu was extremely cruel. However, the one she hated the most was Shen Miao. All these should have fallen on Shen Miao, but now her Qing'er had to suffer. To be tortured to such a state, the next half of Shen Qing's life was finished. She could not wait to break Shen Miao's neck, drink Shen Miao's blood and eat Shen Miao's meat. Ren Wanyan was after all the one who managed the Shen residence, thus even at such a time like this, she was able to control herself and did not go crazy. Instead she instructed Shang Lan, who was beside her, with a trembling voice, go and find a horse carriage to go down the mountain immediately. But, Shang Lan looked at her scared. Furin, it is raining outside heavily and traveling is not possible. The mountain was located deep in the valley and the roads were already bumpy. With such a rain, it would be extremely muddy so that one would not be able to move forward. If one were to forcefully go down the mountain, one would fear to be caught in an accident. It was not possible to go out in such a weather. Then how about Qing'er? Ren Wanyan finally was unable to suppress and screamed out. With a paw, she gave Shang Lan a slap and ferociously said, how about my Qing'er? Outside the room, Shen Miao looked on quietly. She stood under eaves and looked at the curtain of rain that covered the landscape, seemingly covering up all the dirty schemes. Originally the person that would be dishonored was her. But now the person who let Shen Qing be dishonored was also her. Ren Wanyan personally heard her own daughter being humiliated the entire night. Originally she could save her, but she watched on with folded arms the entire night. Would not Ren Wanyan feel a bone-piercing, heart-wrenching pain every time she recalled it? Would she feel the pain she felt when she heard of Wan Yu's death? To now want to bring Shen Qing back to the city for treatment but having to remain here due to the rain, Ren Wanyan could not move forward or retreat. Would the flushed with success Ren Wanyan feel any traces of despair? Go seek a physician. No matter what kind of method, go and get a physician. If you cannot find a physician, you will die here. Ren Wanyan shrieked at Shang Lan. Shang Lan had followed Ren Wanyan for so many years but had never been reprimanded by Ren Wanyan before. She felt both wronged and afraid and agreed before running out quickly. As she ran out, she could not help but glance at Shen Miao. Everything was undoubtedly planned ahead and the one who was supposed to be resting here was Shen Miao. How would there be such a coincidence? Shen Qing was not one who was easy to speak with, moreover she had a grudge with Shen Miao so she would not have agreed to exchange the room with her. This matter was odd. She looked at the plainly dressed young slim female. She looked pleasing to the eyes but one did not know why was there a murderous feeling oozing out of her body. Kaiju, go and call a few people over and close the doors. Ren Wanyan fumingly said with rage between gritted teeth. When the doors were closed, the inside and outside of the doors were like two different worlds. Shen Yu had yet to recover to her senses as she turned to Shen Miao and said unbelievably, fifth younger sister, is eldest sister insulted by some evildoer? Shen Miao did not express an opinion. Prince Yu indeed really intended to just play with the other and leave before dawn. He also understood that for the daughters in noble families, the most terrible thing was having their reputation destroyed by someone unknown. But it seemed that Prince Yu was also not a fool so he would eventually find clues to it. After all this substitution tactic was actually so simple that it was shocking. She still held on with her words but did not know that when Shen Yu saw her look, Shen Yu's heart trembled and she quivered. Fifth younger sister, it should not be you who harmed eldest sister. It was undoubtedly Shen Qing who was resting in the southern pavilion last night and Shen Miao was resting at the northern pavilion but at the end both of them changed their locations and this thing happened. If the rooms were not exchanged then the person who was laying here would be Shen Miao. And with Shen Yu's understanding of Shen Qing, she would never give the room up to Shen Miao. Could it be that everything here was Shen Miao's doing? Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao like she was looking at an extremely scary thing. But she only heard and saw Shen Miao smiling lightly. Second older sister, rice can be eaten indiscriminately but words cannot be said indiscriminately. How would I have such an ability to harm eldest sister? You have thought too highly of me. But, Shen Yu still had some suspicions in her heart but she did not know why she felt that there was something off about Shen Miao. And the matter last night would definitely be associated with Shen Miao. If you have the heart to worry about these things, why not worry about yourself? Shen Miao said. Me. Shen Yu started to tense up. What about me? Do you think that your two maids beside you will be able to live after seeing this private matter of eldest sister? What? It seems that second older sister really did not know how sinister the world is. Shen Miao gently smiled. Those servants who knew the master's secrets, especially when the secret is a scandal, how long would you think they can live? Huang Ying and Qing Luan, who were beside Shen Yu, suddenly turned pale. They naturally knew that in higher-ranked big families, there were no shortage of filthy and shameful secrets. If any servant were to witness any, there was only a dead ending for the servant as only the dead could keep secrets. Both of them had seen Shen Qing been insulted by someone and naturally there was no way out. Shen Yu turned pale with fright. She had only just cared about her shock and had even forgotten about this matter. It was not that she was a sentimental person, but in order to train up a maid by one's side would require lots of energy. How would one be willing to sacrifice for nothing just because of this matter? Moreover, it was sacrificing the most handiest too. Not only the both of them. Shen Miao smiled gently and her eyes swept across the scene and landed on Gui Momo and gave a long meaningful look. No one can escape. Gui Momo and the two maids immediately almost fainted. What was there to fear? What was so scary? When one attains power, even one's poultry and dogs would rise to heavens, but if the master was not good, not one servant could escape. In the past life when Shen family's house was searched and possessions were confiscated, those servants who relied on force to bully others were all helping others secretly, following whichever master they would have to accept with whatever the outcome was. Otherwise, would not it be wasting too much talents on a petty job if the move only harmed one person? She turned to leave and Shen Yu hurriedly called her when she saw it. Where are you going? Is not the purpose of coming to Wolong Temple to pray? Shen Miao replied lightly. I too have a lot of perplexing matters and naturally want to ask Buddha about it and burn some incense, else it would be a wasted trip. The plain dress just left like that and that indifferent back did not even pause as if there was not a catastrophic event that just happened today. Everything was just as planned. Sleep the entire night then go up to burn incense and pray for safety and peace. It is not right, Shen Yu suddenly said. Why are her two maids not here? Gui Momo was also in a daze. This morning when Shen Miao saw Shen Yu, she let Jing Jie and Gu Yu go to the kitchens to bring over the food until now. They had yet to appear so they did not know about the matter of Shen Qing. Now to think about it, how would it be such a coincidence that Shen Qing's and Shen Yu's maids witnessed the scandal and would not be able to escape from the consequences but only Shen Miao's maids were not present? It was clear that she had deliberately sent them away. She had knew earlier on that this would have happened. She had knew that misfortune would befall on Shen Qing. Shen Qing's matter was arranged by her. When Shen Yu looked back and walked along the eaves, Shen Miao's figure was no longer there. But those clear yet hidden eyes seemed to appear in front of her, making her feel a chill she had never felt before. Nearing noon, the rain finally stopped. Xianglan traveled the entire mountain but she could not find a physician. Usually other than the occasional pilgrims, there was no one to ask. If the monks were sick, they would just pick up some herbs to boil and drink. Xianglan could not find the one she was looking for, and could only look for a monk to get some calming herbs and medication for external wounds for Shen Qing to use. The room was filled with the smell of herbs and some other scent that even if it was cleaned up, it still lingered for quite some time. The female on the bed had her eyes closed as Ren Wanyan sat and leaned against the window. Just a few short shichen and it seemed that she had aged over 10 years. The maids in the room dare not even breath loudly as they were afraid that the mistress's anger would lash out after such a big matter had occurred. When Ren Wanyan was looking at the curtain in a daze, suddenly there was some movements on the bed. She quickly looked down and called, Chinger. Shen Qing opened her eyes and at first glance saw Ren Wanyan before her face turned into a frightened color and her hands reached out to scratch Ren Wanyan's face. Let go of me. Go away. Help. Chinger, it is mother. I am your mother. No need to be afraid. Mother is here. Ren Wanyan felt as though her heart was cut out but Shen Qing was not aware of it. She just continued struggling while staring fixedly at the ceiling and screaming frantically. Xianglan and Kaiju quickly went up to help hold her down but Shen Qing was like she had gone crazy, completely without consciousness at all and could not even recognize Ren Wanyan. With her struggling, all the medication that was applied was all over the place and the wounds were exposed to Ren Wanyan. Ren Wanyan's face was filled with pain and she could not help but scream. Furin, Xianglan and Kaiju were shocked and scared in their heart. Ren Wanyan was all along one who was decisive. No matter how big an event was, she was able to calmly deal with it and the winds and waves that she had went through all these years were not small neither. However, facing such a situation she was forced to such a point. The two maids that had followed Ren Wanyan for so many years could not help but be shocked. Where is Shen Miao? Ren Wanyu aggressively spoke. Fifth young lady, is in the temple hall. Kaiju carefully said. Take good care of Qing'er. If she encounter any more mishap, both of you will not live. Ren Wanyan turned and walked out the door. In the temple hall, a huge towering gold Buddha statue stood overlooking benevolently at the believers. In front of the grass mat, Shen Miao was kneeling on the ground while holding the incense, but no one knew what she was thinking. From morning till now, she had knelt here for a few shichens. Young lady, it is better to get up and take a rest. Jing Jie soothed, it is not worth it to harm the body by kneeling too much. Buddha must have seen your sincerity and your request would definitely be achievable. Request would definitely be achievable. Shen Miao heard the words and a bitter smile appeared on her lips. Her request was long unachievable. There were opportunities to make changes in this life for the mistakes that were made in her past life, but those who died in that wrong life would no longer return. Her Wan Yu, her Fu Ming, would they have the opportunity to return? One feared that in the fated world of mortals, there was nothing left. Moreover, she was not a believer. Shen Miao raised her head and looked at that gigantic golden Buddha statue. It was only an ice-cold statue and could not really save any beings. If the heavens had eyes, how could good people suffer such miserable fates? On the contrary, the bad people were free and enjoyed life. She knelt here and kept burning sticks and sticks of incense, not to worship Buddha but for the people who died in her former life. Those people who died because of her. After her rebirth, she did not had any opportunity and reason to pay respects or observe religious rites to these people, including her no longer existing son and daughter. Now that she was here, she could offer incense to Buddha and pay homage to the death. Shen Miao, an aggressive voice suddenly broke. Shen Miao smiled gently. The people in the world were often impatient. She rubbed her sore knees and stood up. When she turned her head, she looked at Ren Wanyan with all smiles. Second Shen. Seeing Shen Miao's smile, Ren Wanyan felt irritated and stood forward to raise her hand with the intention to slap Shen Miao's face. Jing Jie and Gu Yu wanted to stop it but it was too late. Before the expected crisp sound of a slap rang, Shen Miao grabbed onto Ren Wanyan's arms forcefully and that palm stopped just in front of her face. One does not know why is second Shen being so impulsive. Although you could discipline me on behalf of father and mother, but that does not mean that one can be beaten. I am afraid that there is no such rule in ordinary families. She said. Ren Wanyan had never expected that Shen Miao would actually stop her slap. The young female in front was slim but the hand that she grabbed was very painful. She did not know when did that previously consenting and easy to coax niece actually grew a head higher. She could no longer use the same look at her like when she was young as if one was a little inattentive or one would be plotted against by this little slut. She was not willing to let go of the matter. Shen Miao, stop acting silly. Regarding Qing'er's matter, were you the one that did it? As of now, Shen Qing's state of mind was not clear and no one knew how the matter got to that point. But Ren Wanyan was clear that if this matter was not related to Shen Miao then she would not believe even if she was beaten. She did not know what method did Shen Miao used, but she would definitely not take it lightly if anyone touches Shen Qing or let Shen Qing become like this. Eldest sister was harmed by someone and I am also very sorry about it. But how can second Shen be suspicious of me? Shen Miao gently smiled. If one did not change rooms with eldest sister then the person who would have met with such misfortune would have been me. I would not be able to do such ruthless things. Then the person who would have met with such misfortune would have been me. It would still be alright if she had not said it, but once she said it, Ren Wanyan felt her head jumping in pain. She clasped her hands tightly and her expression was like that of an insidious snake. That was something you should have borne. It is you who let Qing'er suffer in your stead. When Jingzi and Guyu saw Ren Wanyan as such, they were both shocked and angry. They were shocked that this second foreign who usually put on a kind expression would actually shed all pretenses of cordiality and be that brutal. They were angry because if it was not for Shen Miao's alertness last night, it would be the three of them, mistress and servants, that would be suffering today. But Ren Wanyan actually still blamed her. This was clearly the case of the guilty party filing the suit first and did not even have a sense of shame. Second, Shen must not say so. There is still the presence of Buddha here. Shen Miao chuckled as her eyes glanced fluidly as if there seemed to be some light. In this world, everything and every matter are conclusive. If the matter last night did not fall on me but on eldest sister, maybe it was destined by fate. Second, Shen first did not blame the evildoer and did not blame destiny but blame me instead. What kind of reason is this? Ren Wanyan was almost angered to death by Shen Miao. She sneered, you are sure eloquent. It was I who have underestimated you in the past. Oh, so it turns out that second Shen used to see me like that. Shen Miao gave an uncaring smile. Ren Wanyan looked at Shen Miao in front of her. This plainly dressed young female had a gentle deportment and her delicate features were starting to change and had started to gradually lose the original sentimentality. She did not know since when did that stupid and silly idiot Shen Miao had disappeared. There was no trace of the past Shen Miao in this person in front. The tactics that she played in the inner courtyard all these years had fallen through because of this young female's hands and with such a painful price. And Shen Miao still remained elegant, which reminded her of the tragic Shen Qing. Shen Miao, since you are clear and not confused, I would also tell you honestly. Ren Wanyan suddenly sarcastically smiled. Since all pretenses of cordiality were shed, there was no need to put up any loving mask. She said, you think this matter will end like this? Old Furin will not let you off. Your second shoe will also not let you off. That person will also not let you off. Your fate would definitely be tens of thousands of times more tragic than Qing'er. You will definitely be ridden by thousands of people and forever be a slut that cannot be seen in public. Furin do guard one's tongue. Jing Jie and Guyu said out loud together. This Ren Wanyan was the second Furin of Shen residence, and after all Shen Gui was someone in the official circles would actually curse this viciously and vulgar. Never mind if it was a sworn enemy, Shen Miao was still young, how would it become if these foul words affected her ears? Ren Wanyan only then was aware of Guyu and Jing Jie and sneered, you even worked hard to protect these two maids. I want to see how long can you protect them. After finishing, she looked at Shen Miao slyly before brushing her sleeves and left. After Ren Wanyan left, Jing Jie and Guyu looked at Shen Miao with some panic. Guyu worriedly said, young lady, is it really good to shed all pretenses of cordiality? At the end, the pretenses must be shed. No matter how good she could maintain them on the surface, there will not be any soft-hearted or effortless actions from her. Why the need to maintain any pretenses? Shen Miao said. The truth about surviving in the inner palace was that if the enemy was in the light, let them be in the light. If they were in the dark, one would need to find ways to bring them to the light. She had no intention of playing and putting on a performance with Ren Wanyan. This game was filled with violent winds and rainstorms since the beginning and Ren Wanyan had now lost all sense of sanity by her, thus would definitely take her revenge like crazy. But, once back in the residence, old Furin would definitely be biased towards them, Jing Jie whispered. Old Shen Furin was most biased and favored most the second household. It was not only because Shen Gui was old Shen Furin's birth son and also because Ren Wanyan gave birth to two sons for Shen Gui. Without mentioning Shen Yuanbo, the eldest son of the second household who held an office position once he became of age, and would also return to the capital. With two grandsons, how would old Shen Furin not be biased towards the second household? Moreover, Ren Wanyan's mouth could please old Shen Furin so much that she would be confused and disoriented. So upon their return, what happened would only be in accordance to Ren Wanyan's words. Who would believe Shen Miao's words? If there is bias, then let it be. Do not expect these people to call the shots for me. Shen Miao laughed. When her laughter landed in Guyu's eyes, her nose felt sour and she suddenly said, if this is the case, then this servant would bring the matter out to blackmail. If anything bad happens to young lady, this servant will even use this life to fight to the end to inform the entire world of it. Correct. Jing Jie's expression also became cold. Even though this kind of method of killing thousands of the enemy and harming 10,000s of one's own is somewhat stupid, but in the time to come, one would not let them live well. Shen Miao was somewhat stunned. She did not expect that the two maids by her side would be this bold. After being astonished for a moment, she laughed. Yes, in the beginning in order to protect her, Guyu admitted to the charges of the theft of the Imperial Jade artifact and was killed by the Crown Prince of Qin country. Jing Jie used her beauty and became a concubine in order to help her draw support from high-ranking officials. Both of them were very loyal to her, but unfortunately she was unable to give them anything in her past life. After her rebirth, no matter what, she would want to protect these maids. It is enough to make some mistakes once. No need, I do not intend to spread out this news. Second Shen would also ensure that it would not be spread out. This matter was one that needed to be covered up, but eventually paper cannot cover up a fire. When eldest young lady gets married, naturally it would be found out. Guyu was somewhat puzzled. It can be concealed temporary, but it cannot be concealed for a lifetime, unless Shen Qing did not get married in this life. Else once she gets married, the matter of her lost innocence would be discovered and everyone would know. So they would definitely find a way to hide it from everyone. As for what means would they be using to deal with me, they would just do nothing more than finding that person to help. That person? Jing Jie questioned closely, who is that person? Naturally it is that evildoer who abused eldest sister. Shen Miao chuckled, do you really think that last night was truly an accident? Jing Jie and Guyu shivered. Even though they faintly guessed it through some hints, but they was unwilling to believe it. They did not believe that someone would harm Shen Miao as this was such a vicious method, blocking her entire road. They did not believe that Shen Miao would predict it without being a clairvoyant and also did not believe that it was the Shen family's second household that did such a thing. Even though one knew that the Eastern people had bad intentions, but they did not expect that the situation was such. This kind of means was clearly meant for enemies. Young lady, was it really second Furin who ordered people to do it? Guyu had a difficult time asking. If it was only an accident, they would feel that it was fortunate that Shen Miao had escaped that night, but if it was intentional, then the second household would deserve the consequences of it. But why did young lady say that second Furin would find that person for help? That person was not some random person. Jing Jie felt somewhat faint. If Ren Wanyan found some random person to destroy Shen Miao's innocence, now with these accident, Ren Wanyan would have killed that person. Why would she still let that person help? Because that person is Prince Yu. Jing Jie and Guyu suck in a mouthful of cold air. The things that they had previously been unable to understand were now all cleared up. If that person was Prince Yu, then everything was clear. Prince Yu seemed to have some interest in Shen Miao from before, but what kind of person was Prince Yu? Normal females would have gone the other road when they faced him. If Prince Yu had made a transaction with Ren Wanyan privately, then it was very likely that Ren Wanyan would have helped Prince Yu on the matter with Shen Miao. But now with a freak combination of factors between two of them, if Ren Wanyan informed Prince Yu of the matter, with Prince Yu's capricious temperament, he would definitely not let Shen Miao off as he was deceived under the skin of his eyes. Young lady, then, should a letter be written to Master? Gu Yu and Jing Jie were panicking. Prince Yu was someone who was impossible to confront too. Not mentioning power or temperament, there was also the Imperial family that was shielding him. It is no bother. Shen Miao's eyes brightened mysteriously. Shen Qing is just an anecdote. The one I want to deal with is after all Prince Yu. She turned her head towards the smoke that was rising in spirals above the temple hall. Wan Yu, your entire life was just too difficult and it just disappeared so quickly like a flower. Having the namesake of a princess but was not even better off than wild grass. Mother could not even do anything for you. At least now, at least in this lifetime, Mother would help you to retrieve every single thing from those who had bullied you. In one of the buildings in Ding capital, a white-clad gentleman was playing with the porcelain cup in his hands and asked curiously, so to say that Shen family girl turned out to be enemies with Prince Yu. To use her own Tangjia hands to pull Prince Yu into the pit, such a method is indeed clever but being a female, it is truly too vicious. He shook his head and put on a rather sympathetic look. Prince Yu of the first rank. When he faced the purple-clad youth, he had a smile on his face and the pair of eyes on that handsome face was as sharp as a blade. He lazily said, I see Prince Yu is not the one she wants to deal with. Not Prince Yu. Then who? The white-clad gentleman paused and looked at the person opposite of him. You think that? How about using Prince Yu as an entry point and kill the entire imperial family of Mingqi? The youth replied lightly. After a spell of autumn rain there would be a spell of coolness. However, after a night of autumn rain, there was no trace of the summer's heat. Even the sun in the sky seemed to be chilly. In the Shen residence, the eastern courtyard was still a scene of bustling. Old Shen Fern loves extravagance, and would often start preparations for her birthday celebration months ahead and the cost would naturally not be small. The money in the common fund was managed by Ren Wanyan and even though she had also skimmed a lot, every year's celebration was still a show of extravagance and also looked quite stylish. And those written invitations, that were sent to the Ferns and ladies in the various residences to inform them of the events, landed onto the third household's Fern, talented Chen Ruchu. Even though she had passed her middle age, Chen Ruchu still maintained the figure of a young lady. Perhaps it was the air of scholarly appearance that added a lot to her bearings that made her look better than the plump Ren Wanyan. It was because of her beautiful looks, gentle temperament and coupled with her ability to compose and recite poetry, that she was able to entrance the third master of the Shen residence. After marrying for so many years, Chen Ruchu had no sons and only Shen Yu, one daughter. Other than the two Tongfang that old Shen Fern stuffed to Shen Wan, there was no other concubines. The three sons of the Shen residence had different temperaments. Shen Qin was upstanding and steadfast but was overly straightforward, not careful and was somewhat blindly loyal. Shen Gui excelled in fawning and was able to achieve success one way or another in officialdom but coveted wealth and lust for women. Other than having Ren Wanyan in the residence, he also had a few concubines. It was just that Ren Wanyan had powerful means, so even though there were many concubines, there was only a shoe daughter and could not threaten the status of her D-daughter status. Third master, Shen Wan, in comparison was a real talent. If one was to speak about the three sons, Shen Qin took the route of old General Shen, Shen Gui and Shen Wan took the civil official's route, then Shen Wan had far more real abilities than his second older brother. But this did not mean that Shen Wan had no shortcomings. He did not lusted for beauties and had only Chen Ruchu, the main wife, but he focused so much on power and just wanted to climb up. Thus, he would even step on his superiors to attain that. At this moment, Chen Ruchu was carefully writing a card. The sun shone through the window and lightly landed on her body and made her facial features look like it was of a young female. Shen Wan was tidying his collar and when he saw it, he could not help but smile as he walked to her side to hug her from the back. Ah, Chen Ruchu blamed, what is master doing this for? Now my words were not written well and would need to waste a card. Let me see. Shen Wan pretended to pick up that card to look and commented, the words are refined and graceful, just like the mistress. How can it be not written well? Chen Ruchu's entire face blushed. When Shen Wan saw it, he could not help but feel his mood swinging. Even after so many years, there was still an attractive pull from this wife of his, so much so that he would not even look at other females. This was where Chen Ruchu was clever at. There were so many daughters in the Chen family but only she was able to firmly grasp her husband's heart. It was not because of other stuff but her forbearance. What kind of female Shen Wan loved, she would become that whatever kind. Temperaments could be installed, clothes can be changed to fit into his fancy. After a long course of time, men would be similar to pet cats and dogs and would only have you in their eyes. Second Cao should return today. Chen Ruchu snuggled in Shen Wan's arms, do not know if you were as accustomed to eating the food in the temple. The mountain roads are not easy to walk on, not sure if the journey was bumpy. Shen Wan laughed in spite of oneself, what worries are you vexing about? Second Cao would not let you go hungry or cold. Seeing Chen Ruchu still having a worried look, he laughed, you always see you as a child. She is already that old and after a few years, she would reach the marriageable age. What would you do then? Regarding Yuer's marriage, I would naturally pick a perfect marriage for her. Family and character must be the best and must not be like fifth lady, her mouth slipped. That night old Shen Fern was talking to Ren Wanyan and Chen Ruchu and had mentioned on the slide to marry off Shen Miao to Prince Yu. And as Prince Yu's intention, would then support Shen family's second and third household matters so Chen Ruchu had mentioned it to her husband. Shen Wan naturally agreed as he was obsessed with power and authority but no matter how much he climbed, his authority and reputation could not be compared to Shen Qin's. He had been jealous of the first household for so many years, and towards Shen Miao he did not have a single thread of feeling. If Prince Yu obtained Shen Miao and became happy, he would recommend him in the official circles and that would consider to be an unexpected joy for Shen Wan. As for how Shen Miao would be from now onwards, Shen Wan would not even care if she would be able to live well in the next half of her life. Do not know if second Cao had completed the matter. Shen Wan's expression became serious. After Chen Ruchu saw it, her entire heart slightly sank. She knew that her husband had never put power and authority at first place, although Chen Ruchu did not care for the first household, but as a female, there was a sense of the fox grieving when the rabbit died. This time Ren Wanyan suddenly proposed to go to Wolong Temple to pray. People who knew would have known that there must be some ulterior motive did. One is afraid that after going up the mountain this time, upon their return, one would only hear of Shen Miao's grievous news. Rest assured, she lightly spoke, second Shen always do things appropriately so this matter would be a surefire plan. If only it were so. Shen Wan nodded his head. Both of them were talking when they saw Chen Ruchu's first rank maid who suddenly ran in and said with some panic on her face, Fern, second Fern had brought the three young ladies back. Seeing the panicked expression, Chen Ruchu was much more assured as she knew that most likely the matter was successful. She smiled gently and glanced at Shen Wan before putting on a look of being concerned and asked, are the three young ladies all right? Are they tired? It is not good, Shi Qing stammered, eldest young lady has gone insane. Chen Ruchu's smile ended abruptly. Everything was like a dream. In the well-organized Shen residence, in just the short time of a day, it was turned all in a mess. Shen Qing had gone insane. Ren Wanyan of the second household would usually put up airs of being the mother of the entire household. Even though she had a smiling face, but her thunderous methods were obvious to everyone. Regardless of how her character was, after so many years, there was not any trouble under her management, so her management abilities were recognized by everyone. However, this noble woman who always never failed to remain calm and smile, would for the first time show a tired and crazy expression on her face. If there were not the two maids by her side, others would think that it was an unknown crazy woman that ran inside. And that young lady that was in her arms was truly insane. She kept struggling and screaming so much that even old Shen was alarmed. Even though no one knew what the reason was, but the truth remained that the eldest young lady of the Shen family had gone crazy. However, the Shen residents treated the matter like a taboo. Those maids who had seen Shen Qing crazy were all sold away. It was said as sold away, but who did not know that was just burying in the mass burial grounds. The two maids by Shen Qing's side, the two maids by Shen Yu's side and even Gui Momo were all locked up. As such, the only person that was unscathed was Shen Miao. In Rong Jingtang. Old Shen sat on the highest seat and her face was stretched tightly. Her eyes were staring straight at Shen Miao, who was standing in the middle, and it was as if they were poisonous snakes that could eat humans up. Three perfectly all right young ladies went. The one who was supposed to have a mishap was fine, but the one who was supposed to be fine ended up with the mishap. The person who should be suffering was standing here, but it was Shen Qing from the second household that suffered on her behalf. As long as old Shen thought about the matter, the anger was like a big rock stuffed in her chest. Chen Ruchu and Shen Wan stood at the side, and Shen Yu could only stand by Chen Ruchu's side with grievance. Both her personal maids, Huang Ying and Qing Luan, were locked up without any reasons, and previously Shen Miao had said that it would be difficult to save them. At the other side, Ren Wanyan was kneeling in front of old Shen. Shen Gui had some stuff in court and had not yet returned to the residence, and the servant that went to invite him over had yet to return. Naturally, he did not know that his daughter was in trouble. Old Furin, you must call the shots for Qing. Ren Wanyan cried as her nose kept running so much that Shen Wan was also somewhat surprised. To see the second Sao, who was always putting on airs, to not even care about her own appearance was indeed an eye-opener. However, there was some comfort in Chen Ruchu's heart. Ren Wanyan always relied on the power of being the one managing the entire household and did not take the third household into consideration. Now that her daughter had met with some mishap, she was also like a dog crawling on the floor. Fifth lady, I treat you like my own, and Qing also gave in to you for all matters. You both are sisters of the same bloodline, not to mention about supporting each other, but how could you be so vicious? You know that Qing life is considered to be ruined by you. You are really ruthless. Shen Yu had told Chen Ruchu and Shen Wan about Shen Qing being insulted by someone, and at the moment all the servants were expelled as Chen Ruchu was also afraid that someone would hear it. Just as Shen Miao was about to speak, she suddenly heard an angry shout behind her, evil girl. You harmed your sisters, you have a heart that is as poisonous as vipers and scorpions and should be thrown into prison and be given a punishment that even death would not be enough. Shen Miao smiled coldly and turned around to face the male who was striding over. It was her second Shu, Shen Qing's father, Shen Gui. Shen Gui did not even remove his official uniform and strode into the hall. It seemed that he had been given notice of Shen Qing's news and came over in a rush. When Ren Wanyan saw him, she immediately cried more miserably, Master. Qing. Ren Wanyan's and Shen Gui's relationship was not necessarily deep, else Shen Gui would not have filled the courtyards with concubines. In spite of that, Shen Gui was still respectful to Ren Wanyan, not because of anything else but because Ren Wanyan was able to manage the entire Shen residence and had good relationships with Shen Gui's colleagues Furins. As his other half, Shen Gui was rather satisfied with Ren Wanyan, so he gave her face and would not fall in comparison. Shen Miao, Shen Gui turned his head and looked at the young female in the hall. He knew the reason why Ren Wanyan brought the 3D daughters to the Wolong temple. But bringing the 3D daughters of the Shen residence out was only to prevent others from talking. Who knew that the one that would be in trouble was his daughter Shen Qing? The servant who went and transmitted the news secretly told him that everything was Shen Miao's doing. Even though he felt that it was unfathomable, but one would need to take out the anger on someone. Since it was not possible to vent on the second household, then all the crimes and responsibilities were pushed onto the first household. You harmed your sisters with such evil means, and since eldest brother is not here today, I will teach you well on behalf of eldest brother. After he said that, he loudly shouted, bring the rod. Bring the rod. Chen Ruchu and Shen Wan looked at one another. Ever since Chen Ruchu entered the Shen family, she had never seen this Shen family's rod. From what Shen Wan said, the rod was usually used on yin-yangs that committed some wrongdoings and have never been used on the descendants of the Shen residents. Moreover, the Shen family was of a military lineage and the rod would naturally be unusual. The servant quickly took out a long wooden box over as Shen Yu looked over curiously. When that long wooden box was open and the thing inside was taken out in front of everyone, she could not help but to suck down a mouthful of cold air. It was a long whip and no one was sure what the whip was soaked in for so many years that it looked black and shiny. Moreover, it was as thick and coarse as a fully grown man's wrist. With one look, one would know how strong and powerful it was. If one was to be beaten by that whip, most likely half one's life would be gone. If one was to use more strength, then it would be easy for life to be snuffed out. Exactly. Old Shen put back on an arrogant air. Seeing that her son had returned, her back was even more straightened. She after all treated Shen Qing with some sincerity, thus when she saw her granddaughter fall into a mishap, she was angry in her heart. Since Shen Gui had spoken, she naturally would push the boat with the current. Fifth girl had made mistakes and you as a younger brother will naturally teach her on behalf of one's eldest brother. Our Shen family's rules are in order and those who committed a wrong will be given the rod. Fifth girl, you should rejoice for your second Shu's good heart, else it would not be as simple as just bringing the rod out. If the family elders in the ancestral hall investigate, you will be expelled from the Shen family. Saying this, her eyes suddenly moved. Yes, if Shen Miao was expelled from the Shen family, would not that be good? Seeing old Shen expression, Chen Ruchu secretly scolded her a fool. If Shen Miao was expelled from the Shen residence, then with Shen Qin's personality, he would definitely leave together with the entire first household. Even though they did not like seeing the first household well, there were many matters that required the name of the first household. This old woman really think it was that simple. Her thoughts truly originated from a songstress that could not be seen in public. Ren Wanyan was also startled when she heard it, as she had roughly guessed old Shen hidden wish. She however did not wish for Shen Miao to be expelled from the Shen residence. Not because of anything else but because this would be letting Shen Miao off too lightly. She now could not wait to let Shen Miao remain in the Shen residence, then there would be lots of tricks to use to take revenge on her. Once she was expelled from the family, how would it be easy? But everyone had their own thoughts, and when they heard Shen Miao's light cough, she was looking at Shen Gui. Shen Gui was shocked by her inexplicable move and looked at her with a frown. He often put up on airs in the official circles and his official rank was not low. If he was stared at by normal people, they would have been weak in their knees as they see his anger. But Shen Miao did not make the slightest move. Her calm demeanor and undisturbed eyes even projected an illusion to Shen Gui. As if Shen Miao was high above others and he was just a subordinate. This kind of illusion was broken by Shen Miao's words. She said, second Shu indeed has a good heart. Eldest sister is bedridden and second Shu was not in a rush to check on her condition, but was busy with teaching me on behalf of my father. It is probably second Shu truly caring for me, even much more than for eldest sister. When the words were out, everyone in the house fell silent. There was a flash of sarcasm in Chen Ruchu's eyes while Shen Wan frowned. Old Shen Furen's facial expression changed and Shen Yu's mouth was opened, whereas Ren Wanyun's head was lowered as she secretly clenched her fist tightly. If one were to talk about the three masters in the residence, although Shen neglected Shen Miao, he really truly loved her. Shen Wan cherished Chen Ruchu and loved Shen Yu, who was born from Chen Ruchu, like treasured stones. And there was Shen Gui. Shen Gui was one who coveted wealth and lusted for women and probably had not done his role of a father. The treatment to his two sons were much better, but towards Shen Qing, his daughter, he had never disciplined her. Most likely in Shen Gui's eyes, Shen Qing would be married into some nobility and it would be best that she was able to give a boost to his power. This time Shen Gui was this angry since Shen Qing fell into a mishap, and that was not because he was distressed that his daughter had a bitter experience, but because he resented that the plans were disrupted and feared that if Prince Yu were to know of the matter, he would be furious. He was also furious that because of Shen Miao, he had wasted the possibility of using his daughter to gain power for his official route. It all boiled down to the word benefit. If a father were to truly love his daughter, after knowing of the matter, one would definitely return to take a look at his daughter's condition and would not have rushed back in a hurry like this, to discipline the person who initiated the entire thing. So to say, one would feel some pity for Shen Qing. A touch of awkwardness flashed on Shen Gui's face. He could not help but be a little embarrassed to be found out by Shen Miao's words. When he looked at Ren Wanyun again, she had indeed turned her head and did not look at him. Shen Gui's heart was shocked, and when he looked back at Shen Miao, he pondered. One sentence was enough to make a couple be at odds. This kind of instigation was so accurate and ruthless. Shen Qing was the one that Ren Wanyun's cherished the most, but to Shen Gui, she was just another thing that could be exploited. This made the couple who shared the hatred for the same enemy to be displeased with one another. This approach of Shen Miao's was like from a wily old fox in the official circles. The young female had delicate features and looked extremely pleasing to the eyes, but one did not know why there was a faint flash of majesty that made one dare to not watch intently. Suppressing his surprise in his heart, Shen Gui said, "Shen Miao, you still have not reflected upon yourself till now. As such, if I do not teach you today, I would be ashamed to be a man and ashamed to face your father." He raised his hands to take the whip. Shen Yu stared fixedly at Shen Gui's actions with both rejoice in others' misfortune and some nervousness. Would Shen Gui really beat her? Shen Miao was so overbearing that even facing such a scene she would still not admit to a loss. How would second Shu teach me? Use this whip to murder and silence this one, or to beat half to death before sending to court? Shen Miao suddenly spoke. Shen Gui's action paused in surprise. Shen Wan was also stumped for words. Probably they did not think that Shen Miao would be that hostile. Even though Shen Miao had changed these days, but everyone felt that that was only a strong act, but now in front of everyone in Shen residence, she did not bother to camouflage herself and just shed all pretense of cordiality. Evil girl, what kind of words are you saying? Old Shen Furen was the first one who shouted angrily. Is it possible that you are saying that your second Shu wishes to murder you? You are really rebelling against the heavens. Yes, fifth lady, how could you say it like this? Chen Ruchu also finally spoke but still poured oil into the fire quietly. You had harmed Qing'er, but how could you make bogus accusations against the victims? Where were these learned from? Chen Ruchu thought that if Shen Miao and the second household fight till both sides suffer, then her Shen Yu would truly be a fish back in water in this Shen residence. After all, in their third household, Shen Wan's power was not comparable with the first household. Heirs were less than the second household, so if one did not use some underhanded means, one would fear that there would not be any benefits in this huge Shen residence. Ren Wanyun cried as she kowtowed towards old Shen Furen. Look at this. Fifth lady hated us this much. She had harmed Qing'er but still do not know regret and even want to dirty master's reputation. Such arrogance was clearly because she relied on eldest Bo's power to bully us. Could it be that this was learned from eldest Bo? Fifth lady is a young lady, and how would she understand this much? It must be someone behind that taught her to do so. We have supported eldest Bo. How could eldest Bo's family do such a thing? Ren Wanyun's cries were very dynamic as she put herself in a weak position. On normal days she was strong, but at this moment her weak appearance would only make one believe that everything she said was true. Unfortunately, she involved Shen Shen. Dragons could reverse their scales, and Shen Shen was the topic that would rub Shen Miao the wrong way. Her eyes swept across everyone at Rong Jingtang. They were all glaring like tigers watching its prey. They were a family and could talk and change black to white and turn death to living. They surrounded her, like facing a piece of fatty meat that fell at the side of a hungry wolf. But what is the use of having such glib tongues? There were so many females in the inner palace that could speak with great reasoning, but how many were left and how many more became fertilizer for the Imperial Garden's greenery? Second Shen kept saying that I have harmed eldest sister, then one would like to ask a couple of questions to Second Shen. Will Second Shen be able to clarify my doubts? Ren Wanyun was surprised for a moment as she did not know why she felt some guilty conscience when she met Shen Miao's clear eyes. After seeing the surrounding people, she put her heart down since all those who were standing were her side of people, and how would Shen Miao have the ability to reverse heaven and earth? Question then. She wiped her tears. All right, Shen Miao's lips hooked. I would like to ask. That day Second Shen was staying in the next door to eldest sister's room and was extremely close. If anything were to happen, how would Second Shen not able to hear it? Ren Wanyun was stunned. All right, Shen Miao's lips hooked. I would like to ask. That day Second Shen was staying in the next door to eldest sister's room and was extremely close. If anything were to happen, how would Second Shen not able to hear it? Ren Wanyun was stunned. If eldest sister had resisted, there was bound to be noises. Seeing that eldest sister's body was filled with injuries that day, it seemed that she had struggled for help. Then why did Second Shen was unable to hear all this even being so close? Could it be that Second Shen heard it but was unable to come out to take a look as one was just too tired? Ren Wanyun opened her mouth and wanted to refute as her palms were filled with cold sweat. Of course, perhaps Second Shen did not hear the calls for help. Why? Naturally because eldest sister did not call for help. Why did eldest sister not call for help? Was it because she knew that evildoer? You are spouting nonsense. At this moment Ren Wanyun could no longer tolerate and interrupted Shen Miao's words sharply. Shen Gui and Shen Wan were after all men, and their thoughts were not as meticulous as females and did not think much about the matters in the inner courtyards. But Chen Ruchu and Ren Wanyun almost immediately understood. The former looked towards Shen Miao with eyes filled with surprise, while the latter's eyes filled with fear. Shen Miao's words were actually scary. Yes, that day Ren Wanyun's and Shen Qing's rooms were that close to one another, and if Shen Qing were to call for help, how could one not hear it, and if one heard it, then why did one did not go and take a look? Could it be that Ren Wanyun did it on purpose? Ren Wanyun naturally would not deliberately harm her own daughter, but the person who was supposed to be staying there was Shen Miao. Ren Wanyun had not reason to harm her own daughter, but it was not impossible for her to harm her niece. For Shen Miao to say it out straightforwardly, Ren Wanyun's secret plans would not be able to remain covered up in front of others. And she also envisioned another possibility. That Shen Qing did not cry for help at all, and why was that so? To suffer that much abuse and yet not cry for help, it could be intentional. Why would it be intentional? This matter, if one were to make it a smaller issue, it would be humiliated by an evildoer. If one were to make it a big issue, perhaps one would even spread out that Shen Qing deliberately committed the crime of engaging in an illicit relationship with others. This world was already especially difficult for females, and it was always better to be safe than sorry. When rumor starts, it would be difficult to put it out. Shen Miao gently smiled. Second Shen, I find that there are many doubts in the matter. Since Second Shu is also reasonable and uphold justice, it would be better to send me to the Inspector General Government Office to hold an open trial. I would definitely inform the Darren what I know in its entirety and let Darren make a final decision, and maybe that evildoer would also be known. No, Ren Wanyan and Shen Gui opened their mouths together. Ren Wanyan said no as she naturally was afraid that the issue would be complicated. If Shen Miao were to speak the matter out, then discerning people would be able to pick up the secret. There were many large families in the Ding capital, and it was still alright if the matter was hidden well, but if the rumors spread out, then it was not impossible that one would be able to see the truth of her scheme of harming her niece. Moreover, once the truth comes out, what would be the result of Shen Qing's innocence? When these rumors spread out, Shen Qing would need to hang herself with a bout of white silk. However, Shen Gui said no because of a directly opposite thought than Ren Wanyan's. He was only afraid that the matter would implicate Prince Yu of the first rank. Originally the matter was mucked up and Shen Miao's and Shen Qing's identity were mixed up. When Prince Yu gets to know of the matter, he would definitely be furious, and if he was implicated in the matter and affected by troubles, Shen Gui was afraid that his official route would be particularly difficult. As such, the married couple who were previously menacing, both stopped Shen Miao's proposal in unison. Then what would Second Shu do? Shen Miao's eyes swept to the thick long whip that was in Shen Gui's hands and casually asked, still want to use the family rod? The people in the room quietened for the moment as Shen Yu stared incredulous at Shen Miao. Even Shen Yu could see that she was threatening. As if to reflect the surprise in everyone's heart, Shen Miao softly laughed. If Second Shu was to use the family's rod, then there is no way out, but I have always had a stubborn temper, and if I were to carry that evildoer's crime that does not belong to me, when father returns, then I would definitely think of a way to report to the government office. She was implying that if Shen Gui hit her today, in the future when Shen Qin returned, she would certainly complain, and at that time would also urge Shen Qin to report to the government office. One say it was to report the evildoer, but who would know who exactly she was reporting against at the end? Second Shu, are you bringing the rod out or not? If it is to be used, then please do it quicker. There was a light smile in Shen Miao's clear eyes, and there was also a slight ridicule. Since there are so many people around, I will not be able to escape from it. Practically lumping the entire crowd of people in Rong Jingtang as bandit-like characters, who wanted to see Shen Miao suffer the beating. Shen Gui never had thought that he would be threatened by his own niece today. After all, he had been in the official circle for a long time and had the double-face ability to cope with any matter like fish in water. It was not that he had not thought about any way out, but it was that Shen Miao did not give him an opportunity to respond at all from the beginning. It was Shen Miao who was speaking in the beginning, and as it went along, her words were as sharp as a spearhead and were so aggressive that one could not retreat at all. A trace of surprise flashed in Shen Wan's eyes. This second older brother of his was a wily old fox in the official circles that even those political opponents had never pushed him to such an awkward position. Moreover, the person that pushed him to such a situation was just a 14-year-old young female. The first household was really that indestructible. Shen Wan's bright eyes turned cloudy. Shen Gui's face was becoming somewhat red. Today he did and said everything in a fit of anger, as in his heart, Shen Miao was after all a niece that was easy to con and weak in character. Even if she was to beaten and the rod was being used, in the future with some coaxing, she would not dare to speak of today's matter. Who knew that Shen Miao would change drastically, and he had no idea that she had become a thorn in his head. She not only did not submit herself meekly to adversity but still attacked him and made him unable to step down from the stage. If he was not afraid of Shen Qin, Shen Gui really could not wait to kill Shen Miao now. The old Shen Furen who was sitting in the hall quietly saw that her son was forced into such a situation. She looked at Shen Miao with a trace of anger in her eyes. After suppressing it down, she said deeply, enough. The hall fell into silence again. Shen Gui sighed in relief and everyone looked towards old Shen Furen. Old Shen Furen was ignorant of the court's affairs and the outside world but was a good player in the inner courtyard. Shen Miao's words to both Shen Gui and his wife made her raise her eyebrows, and she could not help it. The more Shen Miao showed a wise side, the more her heart felt malicious. It was because Shen Miao now held Shen Qin's reputation and could threaten Shen Gui's matters. So for the time being, old Shen Furen dare not act rashly. She coldly said, fifth girl, what your second Shu said was rational. Taking into consideration your young age, the rod can be forgotten, but since eldest girl has suffered in your stead, you will go and kneel in the ancestral hall to atone for the crime against your eldest sister. As of today, you are confined and go copy Buddhist scriptures while kneeling in the ancestral hall. Whenever eldest girl recover, it would be when you were released. That meant to keep Shen Miao locked up permanently. Shen Yu was somewhat disappointed when she heard this. She still wanted to see Shen Miao beaten so much that she would not be able to get out of bed, or perhaps that she be expelled from the family clan. Who knew it was just a painless and superficial confinement, and when Shen Qin came back in a couple of months, Shen Miao's confinement would be lifted, and at that time everything would be like before. Ren Wanyan was also somewhat dissatisfied, but Shen Miao's words were so shocking that she now dare not act rashly. At this moment her heart was in a mess and she was unable to think of a better method. Even though she had complaints with old Shen Furen's words, she knew that this was an interim tactic, and so she could only simmer and not say anything. Oh, Shen Miao's voice was slightly dragged out and her words were clearly gentle, but one did not know why when others hear it, there were 100 of different feelings to it. She said, understood, I will atone for older sister in front of Buddha. Now every word that Shen Miao said all seemed to have another meaning. Ren Wanyan could not help but feel a layer of goosebumps all over her. She did not know what to say, so she could only cry. Alright, old Shen Furen was rather intolerable today and could not stop Shen Miao and thus felt a stone blocking her heart. Looking at Ren Wanyan crying, she felt more frustrated in her heart and said, second son, bring your Furen out. What with all the crying in Rong Jingtang? All of you leave. Fifth lady, you now go to the ancestral hall to kneel and do not even bother to take dinner today. Everyone retreated and Shen Miao did not bother too much about the matter. She left Rong Jingtang and headed towards the west courtyard. Shen Wan said heavily, fifth lady has really grown up. Yes, Chen Ruchu's lips pulled. This time fifth lady can be considered a real eye-opener. Mother, Shen Yu softly spoke, fifth younger sister is somewhat scary. At Wolong Temple her placid expression and ability to let Shen Qing suffer a loss and yet get out of it unharmed made Shen Yu feel a trace of fear. She did not know since when did that stupid and easy to talk to Tang Mei acquire such an ability. What is you are scared of? Shen Wan pat Shen Yu's head. It was clearly a loving look, but his words were however gloomy. She is just a little girl who does not know how high the skies are and would sooner or later pay the price. Shen Miao really did as what old Shen Furen had arranged and entered the ancestral hall of the Shen family. The Shen family was of a military lineage and the ancestors that were worshipped were all ancestry of successive dynasties. These ancestors fought on horseback for the Shen family and laid out such a prosperous family property. Unfortunately, upon reaching this generation, the Shen family coincidentally was not far from falling. Old General Shen's generation was actually thriving initially. Unfortunately, in one of the wars, several brothers of the Shen family were killed and only old General Shen survived. Old General Shen had 3 sons and only one took the military route. Now the Shen residents inherited the original glory on the surface, but other than the formidable great General Shen Xin, it was only an out-and-out literary family, which was ironic. Is young lady numb from the kneeling? Gu Yu asked. Jing Jie and Gu Yu also followed into the ancestral hall. Shen Miao was worried that Ren Wanyan would take action behind her back, even though she had deliberately drawn Jing Jie and Gu Yu away so that they would escape the fate of being killed. But in the huge Shen residence, each one had their own ulterior motives, so she kept them by her side. No matter how long Ren Wanyan's hands were, she would not dare to do anything in front of her. Even it is not numbness, the humidity is also heavy here. Jing Jie complained as she looked at the small window. Now it is raining and the ground is wet. What would happen if one were to caught an illness from kneeling? Moreover, they really have nothing better to do. What does this got to do with young lady? This is exactly a case of the guilty party filing the suit first. Wait till master is back, see if they still dare. You should say a few words less. Gu Yu blamed. If one were to be found out, young lady would be at a disadvantage. Shen Miao smiled and did not care about it. Jing Jie thought for a while and asked again, however it is also out of anyone's expectations. Today so many of them went to wrong Jing Tang, but there was not anyone by young lady's side and even then she could leave unscathed. Although it is also bad to kneel at the ancestral hall, as compared to what this servant has thought might happen, it is already a lot better. Before she entered wrong Jing Tang to be condemned, Shen Miao did not bring any maids in. Thus Shen Miao's maids did not know what happened inside. Young lady must have convinced the entire room full of people. Gu Yu said admiringly, to face so many people and not even be afraid, young lady now has more of master style. So many people, Shen Miao laughed in her heart. It was only a small little Shen residence and it was nothing more than some jumping clowns that could not be seen in public. At that time when Fu Shuyi wanted to change the crown prince, the official stood at Mei Fern's and Fu Chen's side. Her Fu Ming was under house arrest and she wore the formal attire of an empress and faced the officials from the throne and argued with those officials, weeping blood with every word. How meager could the power of one person be? Just like she was obviously the most distinguished lady in the world and married to the world's most distinguished man, but she could not even protect what her son deserved. No one stood by her side and she could not retreat as she had people to protect. It was because at that time she was unable to protect her precious people that now she would use more intense means. Cruel, ruthless, hypocritical, cunning. That did not matter. As long as the knife was pointed at the enemy and the one who fell was the opponent, even if the process was cruel, she would shoulder all the sins, what would it matter? She closed her eyes. The ancestors' memorial tablets were in front of her as Shen Miao softly contemplated. Ancestors, if your spirits are still here, please grant me the sharpest of arrows and swiftest of horses to kill the enemies with my hands. 56-65. After chanting it and opening her eyes, she saw Jing Jie looking at her while blinking her eyes. She took a bag of snacks from her arms and smiled. Young lady has gone hungry for so long and cannot go without eating. This servant has some snacks here for young lady to fill up the stomach. It was not really because of old Shen Fern's order that she really stopped eating. She reached for the paper bag and when she opened it, she could not help but be momentarily surprised. This was what this servant found in young lady's room in Wolong Temple. Jing Jie scratched her head and said, at that time, young lady gave the snacks to this servant. After this servant tried a piece, this one had never tasted such a great tasting snack like this and could not bear to eat it. After returning to the residence and head to the ancestral hall with young lady, this one did not have time to bring food from outside and is only left with this. Shen Miao looked at that small and intricate snack. That was the one that Xie Jingxing left after he talked with her. Thinking of it, it was like she could see the handsome face of that youth in the curtain of rain and that mysterious identity of his. Xie Jingxing, Shen Miao muttered to herself irresolutely, just what kind of person was he? In Kai Yun Yuan. The physician just left, and Shen Qing who had drank the medication to soothe her nerves was asleep. Even though she had seen it many times but when she saw the bruises on Shen Qing's body, Ren Wanyan's heart could not help but feel a knife being twisted in it. That physician was of her people and naturally would not speak about this, and he had told Ren Wanyan that the injuries on Shen Qing's body were too serious and with her unclear sanity, one feared that she would need to rest for quite some time. As to why her sanity was not clear, it was because she was scared to this state. In that fated night, Ren Wanyan dared not think of what kind of torture Shen Qing had actually suffered. That night she was staying next to Shen Qing, and could hear Shen Qing's cries for help but she thought that it was Shen Miao so she did not went up to stop it. At the end her daughter's life was ruined. As long as she thought about it, Ren Wanyan's heart was filled with regret. Shen Gui took a look at Shen Qing on the bed and seemed to feel that his head ached and he turned to leave. Stop there. Ren Wanyan stopped him. Qing has now become like this, and you still want to go to that vixen's courtyard. Shen Gui was lecherous and had a few concubines in his backyard. Each one was beautiful and gentle but Ren Wanyan was powerful as she could settle them appropriately. Even though Shen Gui was lecherous, he knew that only Ren Wanyan could make his official route go more smoothly, and would not overstep the boundary of what was proper so Ren Wanyan would not control him. Men were all the same, the concubine courtyard was nothing more than a plaything. Why would she compete with a plaything? But today, she was being somewhat unusual. You better not create trouble without reason. Shen Gui was somewhat irritated. Today he was rendered speechless by his own niece and at Prince Yu's side. He did not know what would the situation be and if he would be angry with him. Thinking about these matters, Shen Gui became more anguished and now after seeing Shen Qing, it was like pouring oil onto fire. His tone was somewhat impatient. It is useless for me to stay here. It would be better if I am undisturbed so I could think of what to do next. Think. Ren Wanyan changed her usual temper of looking at the bigger picture and screamed, you only know how to think. What exactly is Qing to your eyes? Now she had become like this and you as a father was not in the least concerned and would not care about it. In your heart, I fear there is no Qing at all. In this world, how could there be such a vicious father like you? When the words were spoken, even Ren Wanyan's two close maids, Lan Shang and Kai Ju were stunned. Normally Ren Wanyan would face things calmly, and even when Shen Qing encountered the mishap in Wolong Temple, she also pushed forward and looked at the overall situation. As for Shen Gui, even though he did not say any harsh words, for Ren Wanyan being such a rational person to suddenly become a shrew and quarrel with Shen Gui, no one could believe it. Ren Wanyan also did not know why she was like that. Seeing Shen Gui like this, Shen Miao's words that were said in Rong Jingtang still echoed in her ears. When Shen Gui knew that Shen Qing had fallen into a mishap, his first thought was not to go take a look at Shen Qing's injuries but to discipline Shen Miao. This was by no means what a real father should do. Shen Gui did not even care about his daughter's life and death. Perhaps Shen Qing was just a valuable thing to Shen Gui, and because she had value so he continued to keep her. Now that there was no value, he was not even willing to give her another look. Shen Miao's provocation was insignificant in Rong Jingtang but after ruminating till now, it finally exploded. You shrew. Shen Gui was often flattered in official circles and when would there be a time where he would be accused and scolded? Even though he was resentful in his heart, he still knew that he could not shed all pretense of cordiality with Ren Wanyan, so he sneered, "You say that I am not a good father, but are you a good mother? Qing was brought to Wolong Temple by you and you should have taken proper care of her. You were by her side but still let her fall into a mishap under your eyelids. That night, were you not sleeping next by her room? If you really loved her, then in such a short distance, how did you not discover that the person who was in trouble was Qing?" When he spoke, Ren Wanyan was immediately stunned. The thing that she most regretted and hated was that night in the northern pavilion. She had obviously heard the cries for help and obviously had the opportunity to save her daughter, but a series of factors let Shen Qing fall into a mishap. Now with Shen Gui stabbing her heart with a knife and putting salt on her wound, it rendered her stunned on the spot. Shen Gui saw that she did not speak and thus he scoffed and brushed his sleeves and left in a huff. No one knew which concubine's yard he went towards. Ren Wanyan stood blankly for a moment when suddenly her legs softened and she collapsed onto the ground. She held her face and started to cry softly. Shang Lan and Kaiju were both shocked and scared in their heart. The current Ren Wanyan seemed to have collapsed overnight and was beaten into a hopeless position. There was not any of the previous proudness and arrogance. The two maids could only step forward to comfort. After crying for some time, Ren Wanyan wiped her eyes and stood up again. She said, "Bring paper and brush over. I want to write a letter to Yuan Er." Shen Yuan was the eldest son of the second household and Ren Wanyan's eldest son. Today he was appointed in Luzhou and once his term in office was completed, he would return to Ding capital as an official. If one were to say in all three households, Shen Yu was the proudest. In the second household, Shen Yuan Bo was the youngest and Shen Qing was after all not qualified, but Shen Yuan was however unique. At a young age, he was able to achieve a scholarly honor and he did a good job that even Shen Gui would be amiable in front of this son. Since father is unreliable, then there is older brother. Ren Wanyan looked at Shen Qing who was sleeping and said with clenched teeth, "Yuan Er doted you his younger sister the most. Shen Miao, that little slut, this time I want you to pay for your actions and live a lifetime full of regrets." Shang Lan quickly ran to get paper and brush. Ren Wanyan sighed heavily and spoke to Kaiju who was at her side, "Are those girls still there?" The four maids and Gui Momo are all in the woodshed. Furin want to feed them the mute medication or directly. These few maids naturally witnessed Shen Qing fall into a mishap. There were Shen Qing's maids, Yan Mei and Shui Bai, and Shen Yu's maids, Qing Luan and Huang Ying, and also Gui Momo. Feed Shen Yu's maids the mute medicine and hand them back to Qi Shui Yuan. Let Chen Ruchu handle them herself. Qing Er's two maids, Ren Wanyan said viciously, sell them to the 9th-ranked brothel. Would not it be letting them off lightly if they were to die just like that? Since the protectors did not do their jobs, naturally the sins are not forgivable. Kaiju could not help but break into a cold sweat. A brothel and a walu were different. The ladies in a walu could choose to sell their skills or sell their body, but the ladies in a brothel all did business of flesh. Moreover, the 9th-ranked brothel was the lowest of all because the guests were all the rudest and coarse lowest people, and because of being the lowest-ranked people, they would not care about the fairer gender and would even be brutal. Those females would need to receive customers non-stop, be it day or night. The money they received were not their own and was directly given to the mama. If there came one day where they become infected by venereal diseases, they would not have any medication to take and will be thrown out in a mat and freeze to death, hungry to death or even bitten to death by dogs. These were all common scenarios. Therefore those people who were sold to the 9th-ranked brothels were all servants that had committed heinous mistakes or else it would be due to their owner's hatred. Yan Mei and Shui Bai followed Shen Qing since young and after all these years, if there was no credit there was also hard work. Who knew that their fate would be as such? This servant noted, that Gui Momo, Kaiju probed. Gui Momo had already cast her lot with them and was regarded as Kai Yun Yuan's people. Gui Momo, Ren Wanyan sneered with her head lowered, that night what exactly happened, I do not know. But now to think about it, there is still a need to meet Gui Momo since she was the one that know the ins and outs of it. The abandoned woodshed was filled with a rotting odor. It had been raining for the past few days that even some mushrooms grew on the floor. If it was as per normal, it would be quiet, but in the current darkness, it seemed somewhat strange. This woodshed had been used to lock up countless number of people and those were ones who had committed a mistake in the Shen residence. There were masters and servants before but these people would not meet a good ending because after being locked here for a while, they would disappear from the Shen residence quietly, without a noise, as if they had not existed in the world before. At this moment in the woodshed there were some strange voices and there seemed to be someone struggling, and their legs had kicked onto something before suppressing their cries. Placing the lanterns in their hands aside so that light would shine the woodshed up. The dim yellow light, it made the woodshed to look even more eerie. Two larger-sized old women were holding the two maids by their neck and pouring some stuff from the bottle down into the maid's throat. The two maids kept struggling but unfortunately their weak and small bodies seemed to be like a small chicken in the old women's hands. Those women clenched the maids' chins closed so they would be unable to vomit the thing out of their mouth. No one knew how much time had passed but the two maids finally stopped struggling and clutched their painful neck. Drag them out. One of the old women ordered the servant behind her and two more servants came in to drag the two maids out. These two, the old woman pointed at the other two maids, will also be dragged out. But Furin has specially mentioned to take great care of them as they would be sold to that kind of place. If you are willing, then do it according to your wishes. When the two servants heard it, their eyes exposed a coveting look. When one looked at the two maids again, there was only despair on their faces. The two old women saw that everything was almost cleaned up, so they got up and headed out. Did Furin mention about what to do with this old servant? In a dark corner, a silhouette suddenly rushed out and hugged the legs of one of the old women. What about this old servant? That person was not someone else but Gui Momo. Momo must not be impatient. That old woman pulled Gui Momo's hand away from her legs and spoke eccentrically. Furin places an importance to Momo and would deadly arrange completely for Momo. Just wait for it. Finishing, she left without turning back. The room suddenly fell into darkness again and Gui Momo shrank to the corner, looking extremely fearful. No one was willing to die. She wanted to continue living. In the gloomy and eerie woodshed, there were sounds of the occasional mouse climbing around, as if it was eating the firewood and coming with the movements of the night. It made one's heart cold. Gui Momo was all alone in the corner. After so many years, even though she was just a Momo, second and third household were willing to give her face because she was favored by Shen Miao, and her life in the Shen residence was considered quite good. Sometimes, Gui Momo's life was even better than some of the wealthy families. It was easy for the frugal to become extravagant but very difficult for the reverse process to happen. She was not used to days of suffering, much less sent to the woodshed like those lower-ranked maids. The thin clothes that were worn could not resist the cold at night but her heart was colder than her body. Gui Momo's heart was filled with fear as she thought about the four maids that were initially locked up with her. Shen Yu's maids were fed with mute medication and it was not known if they had survived it, and Shen Qing's maids were directly sold to 9th-ranked brothels. She could not help but worry about her fate as Ren Wanyan's methods were indeed ruthless. Gui Momo did not think that Ren Wanyan would easily let her live on. Because not only did she witness Shen Qing's scandal, she also played an important role in this matter. The one who should have been harmed was supposed to be Shen Miao but at the end it was Shen Qing who was defiled. How would Ren Wanyan spare her easily? Just as she was thinking, the sounds of footsteps were heard and were particularly clear in the silence of the night. Gui Momo's body stiffened and fearfully looked towards the direction of the door in the darkness. There seems to be hope yet also despair. What was behind the door? Was it the people that Ren Wanyan sent over to silence her? Or perhaps there was still an opportunity to live. The footsteps were unhurried but were like a holy charm that hastened one's death as it hits Gui Momo's heart. Her plump body was already muddy and sweat kept forming on her forehead as her body was swaying like a pendulum. Ji-ya, the door was pushed open. The person who came in had a bluish-green lantern and that color was already somewhat strange, and seemed to be an evil spirit that would suck out the life of others. Gui Momo looked up trembling and saw a person clad in a white cloak at the door. She walked in slowly and closed the door. There was only that greenish-blue light from the lantern that emitted a ghastly glow. The person who came in finally unclasped her cloak and revealed a delicate fair face. It was Shen Miao. The young female was slender and that greenish light seemed to have made her gentle facial features look strangely white. The brows were light but were more like a death messenger from the netherworlds that made people dare to not look directly. Gui Momo was momentarily stunned before she suddenly called out in surprise, "Young lady." Shen Miao placed the lantern on the floor and walked unhurriedly to Gui Momo before squatting down in front of her. She smiled gently and said, "Is Gui Momo still all right?" "Young lady, you finally came." This old servant knew that young lady would definitely come over to save this old servant. Young lady's heart has always been kind and definitely would not just sit by idly and remain indifferent. As if she had caught a life-saving straw, Gui Momo grabbed onto the ends of Shen Miao's dress desperately with tears coursing down her old cheeks, as if she had suffered grievances beyond her heart and soul and Shen Miao was her most trusted family. Shen Miao swept a glance at Gui Momo's hands that were grasping tightly onto her dress and said with a gentle smile, "It seems that Gui Momo has suffered a lot here." Gui Momo was stumped for words and only looked carefully at Shen Miao's expression. Shen Miao's smile was gentle and warm, and her expression was considered calm without any waves in emotions when saying these words. Gui Momo was appalled to discover that she was unable to see what Shen Miao was thinking at all, even after accompanying this young lady for so many years. She said, "This old servant has been serving young lady her entire life and is nothing but loyal to young lady. That day in Wolong Temple, this old servant accidentally and inadvertently saw it. Young lady, this old servant is innocent. It seems like Gui Momo really see me as a hope." Shen Miao fretted, "But how could I save you? In this residence, who would listen to my words? Moreover, what ability do I have to reverse Eastern Courtyard's orders?" "It is not so. Young lady definitely would have a way." Gui Momo became anxious after hearing this. Even though she knew that Shen Miao's words were reasonable as in the entire Shen residence, the second and third household only treated the first household well on the surface, and since Shen Xin and wife were often not in the Ding capital, it would not be possible for Shen Miao to be of use. But in order to survive, Gui Momo could only grab onto Shen Miao and was reluctant to give up. She said, "Young lady can go and beg old Fern and if that really does not work, young lady can write a letter to master so that master can write back to the residence." They would not dare to not listen to master's words. Gui Momo's eyes brightened up as she felt that she had found an excellent idea and looked at Shen Miao with eyes full of hope. But she only saw Shen Miao lightly laughing before shaking her head and said slowly as she looked at her, "Father's words indeed can save you. But on what basis?" Gui Momo was stunned. Why would I need to use so much effort and energy to run to and fro for a lowly servant? Her voice seemed to contain a slight ridicule and under the glittering lights, it was as if she did not put the person in front of her into consideration. Gui Momo suddenly panicked as she did not expect Shen Miao to say so. She watched Shen Miao grow up and even though she treated her coldly recently, it was only because of her childish tantrums. Gui Momo knew that Shen Miao had a soft heart and at that day in Wolong Temple, she even opened her heart to her, which obviously meant that she wanted to put this Momo in an important position again. Why would there be such a change in expressions? Could it be that someone had said something to Shen Miao? Gui Momo's brain moved. It must be those two maids that spoke, Gu Yu and Jing Jie. They naturally liked to go against her and now that she was thrown into prison, those two girls would definitely hit a person who was down and said something to Shen Miao. She said panicky, "Young lady, this old servant had followed young lady for so long, this old servant has watched young lady grow up since birth. After so many years, master and Fern were not always around, and there was only this old servant and young lady relying upon one another for survival." Speaking till here, she choked a bit, as if to display extreme sorrow. Young lady still talked the last time about that year when young lady had a fever at night, and the physician had yet to come after a long time. This old servant ran out into the rain to look for a physician for young lady. And because of this matter, in this old servant a lingering illness was formed. Every word and sentence was talking about the love and camaraderie of those years. As Gui Momo spoke, she casted glances over at Shen Miao. The family in the first household of the Shen family, no matter if it was Shen Xin and his wife or Shen Chu and his younger sister, were people who valued relationships. Perhaps it was inherited from their military lineage, where one would be grateful for a kind act and seek to repay it. Now Gui Momo was also bringing out this kind act to request for repayment and could only look at Shen Miao hopefully. However, in the midst of the light the young female head was laughing lightly and there was no trace of the expression of being touched, and was like she had listened to a rather interesting story instead. She said softly, "Gui Momo treated me really well at the beginning and how did our first household and I treated Gui Momo?" Gui Momo hesitated for a moment but still said, "Fern and master treated this old servant extremely well. Young lady also treated this old servant extremely well. Be it inside or outside the house, this servant had enough face and the monthly allowance is also generous. This old servant was also not scolded. Not only that, Shen Miao continued her words, your son and your grandson, I have assisted financially in all the areas that could be helped. In the entire Western Courtyard, you are the senior of all and I would not treat you as my Momo but treated you as my family. Trust you, be close with you, think of you, do you say not?" "Yes," Gui Momo replied. Indeed, it was because Shen Miao was young and she was easy to coax, so she was able to coax Shen Miao so well that she believed whatever Gui Momo said. In the Western Courtyard, she was almost half a mistress. "In that case, since I treated you so well, why did you betray me?" Just a light fluttering sentence and Gui Momo, who was caught in her memories was so spooked out of her mind that her soul flew away and scattered. She looked up at Shen Miao and said shockingly, "What?" Momo need not show such a shocked expression. Shen Miao laughed. I originally knew that Momo had thoughts of betraying one's masters and was astonished thousands more times, tens of thousands more times than Momo. Young lady, there must be someone who is inciting disharmony. This servant had never betrayed young lady before. How would this old servant betray young lady? Young lady must believe this old servant. Gui Momo's reacted very quickly and after a brief moment of panic, she put on an appearance of grievance and shouted out the injustice, trying to prove her loyalty. Fine. Shen Miao waved her hands and there was a touch of impatience on her face. In Wolong Temple, second Shen's means of the vegetarian food and aphrodisiac incense were clever. To let Momo do such thing, she really viewed Momo as a trusted confidant. When she spoke the last word, Gui Momo's portrait of trying to defend herself became one that could not even speak a single word. She looked at Shen Miao in a daze with eyes full of an inexplicable feeling. Momo is most probably illiterate and does not know that there is a proverb the mantis stalk the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Momo is one that served two people, so I would want to listen now. In Momo's eyes, second Shen's means are superior or mine a level higher surpassing hers. Could it be that you, Gui Momo, spit out those few words difficulty? That is right. It is me. Shen Miao's voice was very softly suppressed. So soft that only Gui Momo could hear it. She said, the person who was supposed to be defiled was me, but why at the end it became eldest sister? Naturally it was not a coincidence. It was all me. Guessing it was one matter, and hearing it was another. Gui Momo looked at the young female in front of her fearfully. Shen Miao was half squatting on the ground, looking at her with all smiles. Under the flickering lights, that pair of eyes were as if they were a pair of beast's eyes, that were so bright that it was extraordinary and also surprisingly terrifying. It was clearly a well-behaved look, but why was it so fearsome? As to why Shen Miao and Shen Qing were exchanged, Gui Momo kept thinking about this issue when she was thrown into the woodshed. She also guessed that it was Shen Miao who did something, but very quickly dispelled her absurd idea. She watched Shen Miao grew up and Gui Momo was familiar with her capabilities. She had been stupid and soft-hearted, so she would not be able to do such a thing at all. However, Shen Miao admitted to it with her own mouth and did not even bother to cover it at all. If it was others, Gui Momo would find that the person was too arrogant and stupid, but now, she would not see Shen Miao as she did ordinarily. Young lady, she opened her mouth but did not know what to say. Since Shen Miao already knew of the matter, then it was not possible for her to be saved. Second Shen's means had always been brutal. Even though Momo is valued, after this matter Momo would definitely not have any future. What a pity. Her words had some regrets, as if she was really sympathetic of Gui Momo's suffering experience. Gui Momo was fearful of Ren Wanyan's means, and Shen Miao's words aroused hope in her heart. She fell onto the ground on her knees and kowtowed to Shen Miao continuously. Young lady, please save this old servant this time. This servant did not purposely wanted to harm young lady. Second Shen used this old servant's grandson to threaten this old servant. This old servant was only forced to do so. For Master's and Furin's sake, and also for the sake of the over 10 years of service that this old servant had, young lady should see to save this old servant. Her head knocked onto the floor with a pung-pung sound. If it was before, Shen Miao would have respected her and would absolutely not let Gui Momo bow her back that low. But now, she was Empress Shen of Mingqi, and civil and military officials all bowed to her. Of course she could take the bow of a servant who betrayed her master. In fact, the reason I am here tonight is to repay the many years of kindness Gui Momo had shown to me. Shen Miao suddenly said. When Gui Momo heard this, she was suddenly overjoyed and spoke loudly. This old servant knows that young lady is a kind-hearted person and one who values relationships and friendship. In the future, Bodhisattva would bless young lady's life to be smooth, and all those who want to harm young lady would all die a horrible death. Shen Miao laughed in her heart. Gui Momo, this grass on top of the wall which sways with every wind, really made one amazed. She also raised her voice, in fact, not to mention those. That day in Wolong Temple, did not Gui Momo had a heart-to-heart talk with me? From then onwards, I knew that Gui Momo really truly treated me the best in the whole world. Gui Momo was at a loss as she did not know the meaning behind Shen Miao's words. Just now she obviously hated herself, and now when she turned around she was so appeased. No matter what, Gui Momo felt full of hope and immediately replied to Shen Miao, yes, this old servant stands at young lady's side from the beginning to the end. Only young lady is this old servant's master. This old servant would definitely be loyal to young lady for her entire life. Suddenly there was a loud noise from the window as if someone knocked onto something. Gui Momo jumped in shock and looked outside. But how could she see anything from this dark room? She turned to look at Shen Miao after she was unable to see anything and revealed a miserable expression. Can young lady now get this old servant out of here? This is really too dark and humid. This old servant's arms and legs could no longer support. No fear. No need to support for long since you are going to die. What? Gui Momo suddenly looked up and stared at Shen Miao at a loss. This old servant does not understand the meaning of young ladies. Just now the person outside was sent by second Shen. It is presumed that she had discovered that I have visited Gui Momo. Shen Miao smiled. So how would Gui Momo have a road to live? This old servant does not understand. Gui Momo unconsciously straightened up her body. There was a faint uneasiness in her heart, but she did know what Shen Miao meant. Does not understand. Shen Miao tilted her head and thought deeply for a moment. Can Momo remember what words were said loudly just now? Gui Momo heard her words and thought about them. Suddenly her expression changed and in an instant her face paled. She has just now said loudly that she stood at Shen Miao's side from the beginning to the end, and that only Shen Miao was her master. Indeed, those words were just used to coax and con Shen Miao as she hoped for Shen Miao to save her. But if Ren Wanyan's people heard these words, then how would they think about the inexplicable situation of Shen Miao and Shen Qing exchanging rooms that day? They initially suspected that Shen Miao had taken action but dare not believe it, as they did not know how Shen Miao would be able to predict the future. But if it was Gui Momo who told the matter to Shen Miao and schemed with her against Shen Qing, then everything would be justified. This was not the truth, but in Ren Wanyan's ears, it would be the truth. Before she could become afraid, Shen Miao had already opened her mouth to speak softly. I want to repay Momo with such a big gift like this. Does Momo think that it is all right? Gui Momo stared at Shen Miao. Only now she discovered that from the beginning of today till the end, she was led by the nose by Shen Miao. What Shen Miao said, she believed. The relationship between her and Shen Miao was reversed. But Shen Miao was more unpredictable than her, as she could just fall out just in a moment, and she could not guess what Shen Miao's purpose was at all. There is only one purpose on my visit, which is to send Momo up the road, Shen Miao said with a smile, seemingly guessing Gui Momo's doubts. Gui Momo's body trembled. She wanted to cry and shout, but she was unable to produce a single sound. She did not know when did that infant became a young female, and no one had found out yet of this other side of this young female, not even her. The more she wanted to resist and curse, the more she could not help but involuntary shiver when that pair of beastly eyes landed on her. Our Shen family would not keep people who are treacherous. Even if Momo reaches the road to the netherworld and become a ferocious ghost to seek revenge on me, I would have no fear and perhaps would even fight with Momo another round. Her words were colder than her smile. It is not I that turned my back on Momo, but it is Momo who turned her back on me. It is a pity for Momo's grandson and son. Second Shen always does things in an uncompromising way, so perhaps Momo would be able to reunite with them soon. No, Gui Momo's body shook and her tears and mucus were already flowing all over as she cried pitifully. I beg of you, please save them. I have said early on that I would not waste my effort on a servant that betrayed the master. Shen Miao's words were cruel and cold. Watching with folded arms is already my greatest kindness. She slowly leaned forward, like how she used to tell her secrets to Gui Momo when she was younger, and said lightly, I only came over for one last look, taking into consideration the over 10 years of master and servant relationship. Gui Momo, walk properly the rest of the road. A moving smile bloomed out from her smooth little face. It was originally a lovely and delicate face, but the ruthlessness made one's heart palpitate. Gui Momo still wanted to speak, but she saw that Shen Miao stood up and wore her cloak again. The ends of the cloak drew a pale light in the darkness, as if it was the white paper money that was fluttering by the coffin. When the lantern was carried out the door and when the door was closed, everything was shrouded into darkness and desperation seemed to cover everything. Outside, when Bai Lu and Xuangjong saw Shen Miao coming out, they were relieved and supported Shen Miao to leave. After she left, there was a female figure that showed up and looked towards Shen Miao's back before staring at the closed woodshed door, revealing a look of resentment. After many continuous days of autumn rain, the skies finally cleared up. Everything seemed to have been restored back to the usual calmness in the general residence, but from time to time, there was medicine scent coming out from the eastern courtyard which reminded others of what had happened in the Shen residence. Shen Qing's sanity seemed to gradually recover and no longer went crazy when she saw others. But Ren Wanyan was afraid that she would be incited again, so she had her kept in Kai Yunyuan and did not allow her to come out. She also feared that Shen Qing would attempt suicide, so she constantly kept watch around her. As such, the residence's affairs were all handled over to Chen Ruchu to manage. Ren Wanyan seldom left her courtyard and Shen Miao gained a few days of peace and tranquility. However, this did not mean that nothing had happened. After a few days, Gui Momo was finally put to death with the crime of colluding with others to harm Shen Qing. As of now in the Shen residence, there was no one who would mention Shen Qing's matter to Shen Miao. It was not because the matter was settled but because of the words that Shen Miao spoke in Rongjing Tang. They made those people to refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases and thus dare not take any action. They dare not touch Shen Miao but still dared to touch Gui Momo. Gui Momo was put to death according to the law in the residence. Generally when a servant was put to death when they have committed a crime, a bigger crime meant they would be beaten to death, and common crimes would just need to drink a bottle of medication. In short, as long as their life contracts were at the master's hands, no one would care about their life or death. But Gui Momo's death was really miserable as 4 of her limbs were broken when she was still alive. There was not an inch of a decent bone left in her entire body, and all 7 holes of her body were bleeding, making her look atrocious. Even the servant who carried the body dare not look at the corpse's appearance, but Ren Wanyan still called Shen Miao to collect the corpse. Ren Wanyan's maid, Shang Lan, came over to say, Fern had said that even though Gui Momo was put to death upon committing an offense, after all she was 5th young lady's servant. So 5th young lady would still need to make funeral arrangements, so Gui Momo's corpse has been placed in the west courtyard. 5th young lady, quickly go and take a look. Most likely, everyone wanted to see Shen Miao's panic-stricken expression since all the servants in Shen residence knew that Gui Momo was Shen Miao's close confidant. Now that she had come to a tragic end, one would fear that Shen Miao would be broken-hearted. Most likely Ren Wanyan also thought so and felt that Shen Miao would blame herself for Gui Momo's death. No one knew that Shen Miao would walk up to Gui Momo's corpse in front of all the servants in the western courtyard, and lift up the white cloth covering the corpse without even a change of color on her face when she saw how miserable the body was, and her brows did not even wrinkle at all. Shang Lan was surprised at Shen Miao's calmness but saw Shen Miao coldly cry out. Gui Momo acted like a tyrant in the western courtyard, bullied those below her and hoodwinked the master, and was a rampant and domineering person. This kind of servant, even if she did not commit any mistake, the western courtyard would not take in. All of you take a good look today. If in the future anyone were to learn from Gui Momo, this would be the result. Most of the people in Western Courtyard were 2nd and 3rd household spies and in the past would see Gui Momo as the highest, but now seeing how Gui Momo died so tragically and how Shen Miao was so cold about it, a wave of fear started to rise in their hearts. When Shang Lan saw the scene, she did not felt all right as she wanted to scare Shen Miao but who knew Shen Miao took Gui Momo as an example of power. She immediately returned to Kai Yunyuan and informed Ren Wanyan of the matter. This is bad. I had fallen into a trap. When Ren Wanyan heard about it, her hand loosened up and the teacup fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. Furin, Kaiju was somewhat uncertain. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth. Gui Momo was just a raft. It seems that little slut had long wanted to get rid of Gui Momo but borrowed our hands to do it. And now she even consolidated her power in the western courtyard. That little slut is really shrewd. Ren Wanyan was not stupid but because of Shen Qing's matter, she had inevitably lost the previously calmness she had as she was her mother. That night the people who went to look for Gui Momo saw Shen Miao going in to see Gui Momo, and also heard some portion of the conversation of Gui Momo declaring her loyalty to Shen Miao. After this was mentioned to Ren Wanyan, she was sure that what had happened to Shen Qing was because Gui Momo colluded with Shen Miao to change the person in the room. With such a thought in her heart, she hated Shen Miao and Gui Momo like a torrential flood. Since Shen Miao cannot be touched for the time being, Gui Momo, as a servant, can be touched. So she used the most brutal way to torture Gui Momo to death. Initially she thought that when Shen Miao saw Gui Momo's dead body she would definitely be upset, but after listening to Shang Lan's words, Ren Wanyan knew that she has being toyed by Shen Miao. Everything was a ruse that Shen Miao set up. Shen Miao really put on a better show of murdering others with a borrowed knife than anyone else. Ren Wanyan had been in the inner courtyard drifting with the wind and current for so many years that those concubines of Shen Gui would be settled fittingly, but now she was repeatedly defeated at the hands of a silly little girl. In Ren Wanyan's mind, this was an anger that could even describe as fury. Was the letter to Prince Yu of first rank sent? Ren Wanyan asked. It is sent but Furin, if master know about it, he would definitely get angry, Kaiju carefully replied. As with Shen Qing's matter, Shen Gui thought of thousands of ways to hide it from Prince Yu, wishing that he would not discover it at all. But Ren Wanyan could not wait for Prince Yu to discover it immediately, because with Prince Yu's temperament if anyone were to play any tricks under his eyelids, that person would not have a good death. Even if she quarreled with Shen Gui, she must also take revenge for Shen Qing. Shen Miao dared to threaten the entire Shen family, then would she dare to threaten Prince Yu of the first rank? I want her to die without a burial site. Ren Wanyan clenched her teeth as she spoke. Young lady is playing chess again. Bai Lu shook her head as she was somewhat puzzled. What is the meaning of playing chess alone? What can be done other than playing chess? Xuangjong glanced at the person in front of the table and said aggrieving, confined the entire day and even being unable to go out to the courtyard. If this goes on, nothing can be done during the day. Shish, Bai Lu whispered, you better not speak. Young lady is already not happy about the confinement, you better not mention it and provoke her anger. Xuangjong mumbled, our young lady has a good temperament and would not get angry. Speaking of which, they have not seen Shen Miao getting angry for a long time. Not to say anger, not even a shred of emotion. The Shen Miao of the past, even though she was an idiot, her moods were very obvious. Happy was happy, sadness was sadness. But now, the personal maids could not read her. People always said that one's growth would be gradual but Shen Miao's change seemed to have been completed overnight. From simple and weak to calm and unwavering. No one knew what changed her. Bai Lu. Just as they were speaking, Bai Lu heard Shen Miao calling her name and quickly went up. Go and find a time to pawn those gold jewelry in the silver jewelry box that was placed in the cabinet. She said without even turning her head. Yes, Bai Lu quickly replied before she became surprised, but young lady, a box of jewelry was only pawned yesterday and this is the last box. It is of no bother. Shen Miao put down the chess piece, after all it would not be used. After pawning it, pass the money to Jing Jie and call Gu Yu over. Bai Lu agreed but there were some doubts in her heart. Shen Miao was anxious to pawn the jewelry away like she was in an urgent need of money. What was the money for? Kuehuolu Happy Building was the largest restaurant in the Ding capital and was located in the heart of the bustling area, and directly opposite of Kuehuolu was the House of Courtesans. After high officials and noble people finished their meals in Kuehuolu, they would probably go to the Walu opposite to look for beauty and happiness. There were many ranks of pleasure quarters. The superior it was, the higher the level was, and those who were at the highest level were those famous courtesans that sold their talents and not their bodies. Below them were those some young ladies with famous reputation, and the lowest was the 9th-ranked brothels. This kind of brothels were not eligible to be called a lu or yuan and could only be called ban or sha chu. Sanfu Ban was facing opposite of Kuehuolu, and it was the lowest of all brothels. Most often the ones that enter and leave that place were those lowly laborers, and often there would be people who would throw those sickly and near-death young ladies to the streets. Those wandering beggars would carry these young ladies back, perhaps to vent, or perhaps their clothes could be sold for a copper coin. Anyhow, compared to the exquisite Kuehuolu, Sanfu Ban was simple hell on earth. By the window of somewhere in Kuehuolu, the spotless white sleeves of a young man's were seen as he frowned while looking at Sanfu Ban below and saw that someone had thrown some new girls in. The girls were crying and shouting non-stop, seemingly servants of some family that were sent over. Some young maids were beautiful and jealous matriarchs would sell them to Sanfu Ban to prevent them from climbing up to the bed. Truly ruthless. The white-clad gentleman shook his head and said, although the tone was filled with pity, there was no trace of thoughts of reach out to lend a hand. And that young gentleman that was facing him was wearing purple and was filled with an overbearing extravagance. He only poured himself wine and lightly said, people had already entered the residence of Prince Yu and it was yet unknown if it can be found or not. If it was not found, then what? The white-clad gentleman turned his head and looked at him. Carry on searching. The purple-clad youth smiled, and that evil smile was so exceptionally handsome that the courtesan playing the string instrument at the side could not help but lose herself and play the wrong note. When the white-clad gentleman saw that, he teased with a laugh, Xie-san, your charm is getting greater now. Beautiful women favors you, how can I live? He gave another long sigh. Actually, this white-clad gentleman was also very handsome, but upon comparison with the purple-clad youth, there was less of that languid extravagance. That youth's expression was lazy, but that pair of eyes were extremely sharp, as if it was the scorching sun in the skies and was dazzling from birth. By standing at his side, naturally all the radiance were covered up. Gao Yan, if you like, how about upon return, I will bestow you an entire residence of them. Xie Jingxing shot him a glance. Never mind, that white-clad gentleman called Gao Yang quickly waved his hands and laughed bitterly. Beautiful women can be viewed remotely and not to play with. I do not have any excess energy. As for you, he drank a mouthful of wine, who are in the midst of youth when one is unrestrained, how would there not be any close female confidant? If you want in this Ming Qi, there would definitely be large number of people queuing. Close female confidant. Xie Jingxing smiled. How would one know if it was just a skull with red rouge? Stop speaking as though it was that scary. Gao Yang pointed at the pleasure quarters opposite. Look at those cute young ladies in the higher levels. What skull this and that? So uninteresting. Xie Jingxin looked towards where his eyes were when he suddenly paused and surprise flashed across his eyes. How is it him? There were a number of young females that were sent to Sanfu Ban. Some of these females were still young and there were also some that were old and faded, but as long as they were sent in, it meant that they would not have any way out of there for the rest of their lives, and the only thing waiting for them were deep despair and a bleak ending. Today was also the same. When the two vivid little maids were thrown in, they stuck out like two sore thumbs in the pile of haggard and wilting females. From what I see, there is no need to fix them up. The fierce-looking mama took a look at them, look healthy and also have fine and tender skin, but one does not know how long can it be maintained. Whatever. Bring them into the tea room. The two maids were scared so much that they were shivering. They were not other but Yan Mei and Shui Bai that were sold to a 9th-ranked brothel with Ren Wanyun's instructions. Yan Mei and Shui Bai had served Shen Qing since young and were considered the most prestigious of the maids and had not suffered any bitterness. But now, they saw the entire way of the scene of human purgatory, and were scared so much that tears did not even fall. Moreover, that Mama's words shattered that last hope of theirs. She said, watch them carefully and do not let them commit suicide. Could not commit suicide, so they could only be like those women driven into prostitution that constantly pick up customers all day. Thinking of this, Yan Mei and Shui Bai could not help but feel the earth spinning. At this moment a young male walked into Sanfu Ban. This man looked quite young and his body and bearing did not seem to be one who did rough work. The lady who was outside welcoming said, did this young brother walk the wrong way? This is Sanfu Ban. Lu Hejir is further in front. The words implied that with this young man's identity, even if he was finding for pleasure he needed not come to such a place. This was a place where the poorest of people would go to. How interesting could those be? That young man lowered his voice. Are there new ladies that just entered here? The female at the door was surprised for a moment before her mind cleared. Most likely this person had never come to a lowly place and wanted to find something fresh, which was nothing new. Wealthy folks would play a variety of games, and since one came to Sanfu Ban to play, the price was not expensive and everyone could play. She smiled. This young brother came to the right place. There are two girls that just came in today. They were maids who did some wrongs in some official residence and previously served the official's daughter. They look full of life, but they are higher in price. Take me to look, that person said. The female led this young man into the tea room. Sanfu Ban was considered the lowest of brothel not only because this was where those hard laborers go to, but also because this was where the ladies were the cheapest. With only an effort of a cup of tea, if the lady's craft was better, tone was gentler, it was also an ability to make the customer pay for one more dish. However, in general, the guest here would only order a pot of tea. First, it was because the ladies did not want to spend the effort, as no matter how much money there were, it would not be spilt with them. Second, the customers that come here were stingy and would not be willing to spend more than a copper coin. But today this young man ordered a pot of tea and a plate of snacks. This was regarded as a very generous customer to Sanfu Ban. That female who led him quickly called the two girls to be brought in. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were forced to change into thin clothes and went to the tea room filled with humiliation. Both of them were shivering in the middle of autumn since the clothes were unable to get rid of the cold and their hearts were so fearful. When the female who led saw that the people were brought over, she flattered the young man, young brother, slowly drink the tea. This servant will retreat first. When she passed by Yan Mei and Shui Bai, she used a threatening tone, serve this lord well. After the female left, Yan Mei hesitated for a bit, and seeing that there was no movement from the young man, she softly said, Lord, she felt deeply humiliated when she spoke. Previously when they were in Shen residence, they were second household's young lady's personal maid. Not to mention Kai Yun Yuan, even in the entire Shen residence, the servants that saw both of them would be respectful towards them. However, now they would need to be below thousands of people and even being abused by strange men. All of this was from the grace of Ren Wanyun. It was Ren Wanyun who threw them into this lowly brothel. More than 10 of years of master and servant relationships became like smoke and they were treated worse than enemies. Do you both want to leave here? That young man suddenly asked. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were surprised for a moment before they quickly recovered. Shui Bai was somewhat suspicious, but Yan Mei was so moved that she immediately knelt down and said, if this lord can bring us out, this servant is willing to serve this lord for the rest of the life. For Yan Mei, it was better to be dead than living here, thus it would be better to follow a man. At least it would be better than suffering in this forsaken place. Shui Bai was reminded by Yan Mei's words and also followed with a kneel, begging this lord to save these servants. These servants will do everything per lord's wishes. When the young man heard this, he almost choked on the tea in his mouth and involuntarily turned somewhat away. This person was not someone else but the outer courtyard guard, Mo Qing. Today he came to this Sanfu Ban upon Shen Miao's order. Even though he did not understand how an unmarried young female like Shen Miao would know about the brothels in the capital, he came here for something important. Even though it was somewhat embarrassing, he still followed the instructions and did it. I can buy your life contracts and you need not have to follow me as you would be free to go. He said. When Yan Mei and Shui Bai heard that, they stared at Mo Qing incredulously. They did not understand why would there be such a person here since this was a place where men came to look for pleasure. The person in front did not look like someone who did hard labor. Yan Mei was one who was naturally cautious and she asked, what does this lord want these two servants to do? Simple. Mo Qing said, heard that both of you were the personal maids of the general residence's second household's young lady. How did you fall into such a situation? Shui Bai bit her lips and said hatefully, because a wrong was committed and thus kicked out of the Shen residence. But the two of us did not make any mistakes. But since one is a servant, what master says, goes. Until now, Shui Bai would not have revealed the key points. It seemed that there were still some attachments to the second household. Mo Qing said, then do you hate? Both of them were silent. Hate. Of course they hated. It would be fine if a cup of poisonous wine was given, but this method was purposely used, which made one live in a way that was worse than death, like a walking corpse on earth. But what wrong did they made? That night no one knew what exactly happened. Shen Qing inexplicably disappeared and it was their fault. Even though they were anguished that their young lady met with a mishap, but to push all the sins to both of them, even a saint would also feel heartless. Would think that you both also felt hatred. Yan Mei, I heard that you have a younger sister working as a second-rank maid in the Shen residence's second household. Shui Bai, you are also respected in the Shen residence and have many sisters around. Yan Mei and Shui Bai were surprised as this person actually knew clearly where they come from. Yes, when Yan Mei and Shui Bai were sold to the Shen residence, they initially said they were orphans, but that was only purposely hidden the truth so that they were chosen. Yan Mei's blood younger sister was working in Ren Wanyuan's courtyard as a second-rank maid, and because of Shui Bai's lively temperament, she had many good sisters in Kai Yuan. There are no free trades in the world. I will bring you out and you must think of a way to tell me the news of the second household of the Shen residence. Both of them looked up at once. Yan Mei cried out, you want to deal with Furin. This person had investigated both of them clearly, but that he still needed second household's news meant that he wanted to install spies in the second household. Naturally Yan Mei and Shui Bai can no longer return to the second household, but their sisters were still in Kai Yuan and it would be possible for news to be privately passed through. What do you want to do? Shui Bai asked. What does that got to do with you? Mo Qin said, the second Furin of the Shen family sold you both to a 9th-ranked brothel and want you to live worse than death. Even enemies are not treated like that. Unless you still have attachment to that master and servant relationship. Every person for themselves, else the heavens and earth will combine to destroy oneself. It does not matter if you both want to be loyal servants. I do not have time to talk nonsense with you. Since this deal is unsuccessful, then fine. He stood up and prepared to leave. Lord, do hold on. Yan Mei suddenly said, this servant is willing to make the deal with this lord. As long as this lord is able to bring this servant out, this servant is willing to do anything. Yan Mei, Shui Bai felt somewhat hindered. Shui Bai, think of how you had treated Furin and how Furin actually treated you. What this lord said was correct. Every person for themselves, else the heavens and earth will combine to destroy oneself. Unless you want to stay here for the rest of your life. Just like those women outside who still need to receive customers when they are sick. Yan Mei's words were said fast and anxiously, and there seemed to be a trace of cruelty. Thinking of those sickly women outside, Shui Bai could not help but break into a cold sweat and quickly said, this servant is also willing to follow this lord. Then it is considered that a deal is reached. Mo Qing smiled with satisfaction and his heart was somewhat surprised with Shen Miao's deduction of the matter. Before he left, Shen Miao said that second household's Ren Wanyuan was a powerful person as her means were of high level, and could win over one's heart, thus all the servants in Kai Yuan would be very loyal. Even if one were to be thrown to such a place, it would still be difficult for Yan Mei and Shui Bai to immediately concede without difficulties. But there was no need to worry, as the tragedies of the women in Sanfu Ban would remind them of the complaints that these two maids had with Ren Wanyuan, and coupled with their fear of the place they would finally agree with Mo Qing's conditions. When would this lord take us out of this place? Yan Mei anxiously said. This very night is possible. I will arrange for you to meet up with your sisters and you need to convince them to replay the news of the second household to me. It is better not to play any tricks. Even if you were to inform this matter to the second household for atonement, the second household would not believe it. Mo Qing threatened them at the end, and since I can bring you out of this place, naturally I can make you return to this place where no one else will save you. Yan Mei and Shui Bai could see the murderous intentions from Mo Qing's eyes and their heart could not help but jump, and the last intention also flew away. They knelt down and kowtowed to Mo Qing and said, this servant would not dare and would definitely follow as what this lord says. Mo Qing put down the cup of tea and walked out of the tea room himself. When that mama outside saw him coming out so quickly, she thought that Yan Mei and Shui Bai did not serve him well and quickly said, this young brother must feel not satisfied, that two little hoops are new today and still do not know the rules, and after some days of tuning it would be fine. If young brother likes, there are still other girls here. No need, Mo Qing said, I want to buy the two of them. Mama was surprised for a moment. The girls in Sanfu Ban had never been bought before. This was not in accordance to the rules as most of them were criminals and the purpose of them being delivered here was to torment them. She said difficultly, this young brother, the rules here are that the girls of this place are not for sale. 100 liang. Mo Qing took out a piece of note and waved it in front of the mama for the two girls. Mama's eyes lit up and in a quick movement grabbed the note from Mo Qing's hands, seemingly afraid that he would regret it. She smiled like blooming flowers. Since young brother liked them, it would be the fortune of these two girls. This servant will bring their life contracts over. But young brother must remember not to let other people recognize the two girls, else there would be trouble for Sanfu Ban and young brother would also attract troubles. 100 liang. Even in those better brothels, the girls who were sought after would not be sold at such a price. Even if Yan Mei and Shui Bai did not eat and drink and just receive customers till their death, they would not be able to earn back this amount. The mama here were all running business and there was no such thing as leaving the money aside. But she was worried that if it was found out by others, especially by the master of those two girls who sent them in, she would be in trouble. Now she would have to pretend that the two girls had died. When the mama happily went to fetch Yan Mei and Shui Bai out, Mo Qing felt somewhat regretful. 100 liang was not a small sum of money and it was the amount of the entire box of Shen Miao's jewelry that Jing Jie pawned. But in order to install the spies, Shen Miao's offer was indeed too great. Mo Qing thought but still gently shook his head as his heart dare not agree. In the opposite Kuei Hulu, a black-clad person appeared in front of the window and said, Master, have investigated. That person is an external courtyard guard of the Shen residence. The two girls that were bought were the personal maids of the daughter of the second household of the Shen residence. It seems that someone wanted to place eyes and ears in the second household, but it is not known about who was the mastermind. To even be so clear about the conversation between Mo Qing, Yan Mei and Shui Bai, this person's skills were indeed very high that even Mo Qing was not aware that he was being eavesdropped. Gao Yang narrowed his eyes. It seems that it is not so peaceful in the Shen residence. That person do not even let go of a maid. This is indeed too pervasive. Master, need to investigate that person. The black-clad person asked the purple-clad youth. No need. I know who is he. Xie Jingxin raised his brows. You know. Gao Yan looked at him. Who is he? Who was he? Xie Jingxin smiled and his eyes somewhat deepened. Shen Miao had found a high-leveled martial art guard. Even though he was not on par with his men, it was enough to deal with those people in the Shen residence. Even now she did not let go of those girls in Sanfu Ban. It seemed that she planned to take action. However, all these were not related to him. Shan Lang, Xie Jingxin said, write to Shu Yu to get him to return to the capital quickly. You, Gao Yang became solemn. They have not found anything. Why do you let them return? Strike first to gain the upper hand. The youth said lightly. As with the passage of time, the general residence seemed to have been restored to the previous peace. Shen Miao has already been confined for a long period of time and these days she did not go to Guangwentang. Gu Yu and Jing Jie were afraid that she would fall behind with her homework but she did not take it to heart at all. It was better to have lesser problems in the residence than learning those useless poems that were taught in Guangwentang. If one were to say what was worthy of joy, it would most probably be that Mo Qing was able to bribe Yan Mei and Shui Bai and finally let them meet with their sisters. It was still fine with just Shui Bai's sisters but when Yan Mei's younger sister, Chun Dao, knew that Yan Mei was sold to a brothel, she had been trying to take revenge for her elder sister but because of her low status, even though the spirit was willing, the flesh was weak. Now that she met up with Yan Mei and knew that her elder sister was alright, she did not even say a second word before agreeing to pass the news to Mo Qing. It was coincidental that after Yan Mei and Shui Bai left, the two personal maids' position were empty. When Ren Wanyan saw that Chun Dao did things cleverly and dexterously, she selected Chun Dao to be Shen Qing's personal maid. Like this it was even easier to gain knowledge of the second household's movements. Now that Shen Qing's health had improved a lot, even though her sanity has not completely recovered, it was already much better than before. Occasionally she would still go into a trance and mumble some words before shivering in fear. It seems that more time was still required for her recovery. In this day, Ren Wanyan was throwing a temper in the room and there were pieces of shattered cups all over the floor. Currently Ren Wanyan's temper was worsening. Previously things went smoothly with her so there were seldom times that she was unhappy, but now she would just punish others every now and then. Kai Yunyuan currently was gloomy all day long. That no-conscience person, Ren Wanyan said angrily, only know how to run to that vixen's courtyard. Qing'er had already become like this but he only came over to see a few times. Really have no conscience at all. She was scolding Shen Gui and the servants in the room dare not stand out. Ren Wanyan was angry at Shen Gui but that was in fact not the case. But it was that the letter she wrote to Prince Yu of first rank indicating that Shen Miao and Shen Qing had switched identities that night was stopped by Shen Gui. Moreover, did not know what method did Shen Gui used, Prince Yu did not know of the matter till now. She initially wanted to use Prince Yu to punish Shen Miao but Shen Gui happened to smash it apart. Ren Wanyan was irreconcilable and could only put everything onto Shen Miao. Just as she was thinking, she heard an exclamation from the room. Ren Wanyan's expression got serious as she quickly went in to look and saw that Chun Dao was feeding a small bowl of porridge to Shen Qing, but the porridge was spilled all over for unknown reason and Shen Qing was bending over in nausea. What is going on? Ren Wanyan snapped and stared at Chun Dao. Let you take care of young lady, this is how you goof off. This servant deserved to die. Chun Dao quickly knelt down and said, it just that young lady often feel nausea these few days for unknown reasons. Just now after having the porridge, she vomited. This servant would like to bravely ask Furin to invite a physician for young lady. Could it be that something bad was eaten? These days, the physician that was looking after Shen Qing did not often come over. This was because Shen Qing's superficial injuries were almost healed and what was needed was rest. Ren Wanyan often accompanied her so Shen Qing was able to gradually regain some sanity. Now hearing Chun Dao saying that, her heart became anxious. Just as she was about to call Kaiju to invite a physician over, suddenly she was surprised for a moment, as if she had realized something. She looked towards Chun Dao and asked slowly, you said that Qing'er felt nausea these few days. Yes, Chun Dao was somewhat puzzled, but the food that were made specially by the kitchen were clean. Sometimes young lady would also feel giddy. Ren Wanyan clenched her heart and suddenly there was a storm of clouds that gathered over her. Chen Dao was still young and did not know of this matter but she was one who had experience. Was it that Shen Qing was pregnant? Her surroundings darkened and she almost fainted. Shang Lan who was beside quickly supported her. Furin. Take my invitation and invite physician Chen over. Ren Wanyan was stunned for a moment before she patted her heart, but her eyes that were looking at Shen Qing were filled with horror. Chun Dao who was at the side lowered her head so that no one would be able to see the smile in her eyes. As Shen Qing's personal maid, naturally she did not only found out today about Shen Qing's nausea. It was already going for a period of time but the first person she told was not Ren Wanyan but Mo Qing, who helped her to pass the news. Mo Qing also told her that if Ren Wanyan did not discover it then to temporarily hide the matter and disclose it later on. But Chun Dao's luck was not bad. After a long period of time, Ren Wanyan still have not discovered any problems with Shen Qing. Until today. Physician Chen quickly came over under the urge of Xian Lan and Shen Qing's external injuries were also previously treated by him. This was the position that Ren Wanyan's maiden family gave to her when she was married off, and when Ren Wanyan wanted to deal with whichever concubine and wanted to do something inconvenient, she would get Physician Chen to help. Physician Chen was Ren Wanyan's confidant and naturally did not have to avoid anything. Ren Wanyan could only watch as Physician Chen took Shen Qing's pulse. Shen Qing was still somewhat fearful and shrinked in Ren Wanyan's arms. When Physician Chen let go, he looked serious at Shen Qing and shook his head at Ren Wanyan. All of you leave. Ren Wanyan ordered the entire room full of servants. Shang Lan, Kaiju and Chun Dao quickly retreated. When the servants had left, Physician Chen then sighed and said to Ren Wanyan, eldest young lady's pulse is smooth as a pearl. It is a pregnant pulse. Although she had expected it, but when she heard it out from the physician's mouth, Ren Wanyan still felt that the earth was spinning. She looked at Physician Chen and her voice could not help but shiver but it was still firm. Physician do let Qing'er abort the child. Qing'er is still young and she cannot be discovered by others. If it was only her body that was infected, as long as it was concealed well, there may be a way out in the future. But if there was a child, that would meant that was a child out of an illicit affair. Qing'er and the child in her would be drowned. Eldest young lady's health is frail and is young of age. Physician Chen said, if the fetus is aborted, it would only harm the body and if one is careless, would fear that it would be difficult to bear children in the future. One blow after another all fell onto Ren Wanyan. If Shen Qing lost the ability to become a mother, even if she found a family in the future, Ren Wanyan knew what kind of ending a female would have if she was unable to bear children. Women without children in the inner courtyard were like soldiers without any weapons on the battlefield, they would be defeated finally. Moreover, eldest young lady has yet to fully recover. If in addition the fetus is aborted, it would be very dangerous. Physician Chen said. Cannot be aborted. Ren Wanyan stood rooted on the spot, and after looking at Shen Qing in her arms for a moment, she could not help but cry out in anguish, my unfortunate Qing. If the child was aborted, perhaps it would make Shen Qing breath her last, and even if she was able to preserve her life, perhaps in the future she would not be able to give birth. In any case, the fetus cannot be aborted, but if it cannot be aborted, then how would Shen Qing's future be like? There seemed to be no way out of this situation, and in Ren Wanyan's heart, there was only deep despair. Outside the door, Chun Dao looked towards the door and softly said, older sister Shang Lan, eldest young lady. Is eldest young lady? Shish, Shang Lan warned, speak less. If Fern were to know about it, it would not be good for you. Kaiju worriedly said, with this, what can be done? She and Shang Lan naturally knew what exactly had happened. If Shen Qing was pregnant, what would the future of Kai Yunyuan be? One was afraid that each step to take would need to be carefully weighed. Chun Dao's lips twitched, but there was proudness that flashed in her eyes. Physician Chen came out of Kai Yunyuan and returned to his own residence at the northern part of the city after leaving the Shen residence. When he entered the courtyard, he saw his Fern and children running out and could not help but wipe his sweat away. Today before he went for the house call, he received a letter that he did not know who had delivered. It told him that when he take a look at Shen Qing later, he must say that Shen Qing could not abort the fetus, and find ways to ensure that Ren Wanyan would protect the fetus, else his entire family would be killed. His wife's hairpin also came along with the letter. Physician Chen was scared and followed in accordance to that person's words when he treated Shen Qing. He was originally hired by Ren Wanyan's maiden family with lots of money to work for Ren Wanyan, but now betrayed his mistress. He was naturally scared and secretly thought about leaving the capitals. Nevertheless, Physician Chen still have some doubts in his heart. According to Ren Wanyan's words, even Ren Wanyan herself only found out that Shen Qing had symptoms of morning sickness today. So how did that person who threatened him knew of the matter? In the western courtyard, Gu Yu walked in and whispered a few sentences to Shen Miao, who was playing chess in front of the table. After a moment, Shen Miao then smiled, not a bad job. Was the money sent to Physician Chen? Mo Qing had already sent it over. Gu Yu said, why does young lady feed him with such a generous amount of money? Since there is no need for money if his life is already used to being threatened. That is not the same. Shen Miao put the chess piece in her hand down and smiled, people will change. If one were to blindly threaten, then Physician Chen will flee the capital with his whole family and it would be difficult in the future to continue the matter. But if one were to give him a large sum of money, guess what he would do? This servant does not know. Gu Yu shook her head. He would think that since he has already betrayed, he might as well betray all the way and get more money out of it to be worthy of his betrayal. He would continue to do so until his master discovered his betrayal, but till then, he would keep up with this lie. Gu Yu was surprised for a moment and could not tell what kind of feeling she had in her heart. Since when did her own young lady was able to tell what others thought in their hearts? But, Gu Yu was puzzled, by maintaining this lie, what is it for? Whatever for. Shen Miao laughed, let Mo Qing to tell Chun Dao to take good care of eldest sister's pregnancy. The better the pregnancy is, the more favorable it is for us. The days got colder as the autumn passed and winter approached in the blink of an eye. This year in the general residence, it can be considered to be exceptionally depressing. Shen Miao was confined in the Shen residence, Shen Qing was still bedridden and only Shen Yu headed to Guanwentang every day. Even during the mid-autumn festival, only Chen Ruchu brought Shen Yu along, so naturally Shen Yu was the center of attraction, but these things had nothing to do with Shen Miao. However, as time went by, Shen Qing's matter could not be dragged on. Ren Wanyan let Physician Chen prescribe some pills and they relieved Shen Qing's morning sickness quite a bit. Even though others were unable to see any problems, if this were to continue to be dragged on, paper could not cover fire. This cannot go on like this. Ren Wanyan frowned as she tampered her worries down, must find a way to let Qing out to avoid it. In order to avoid others from speaking, she planned to bring Shen Qing back after delivering the baby by saying she was affected by an unpleasant ailment. Once the limelight passed, perhaps the world would be at peace. But with young lady's health, she will inevitably suffer if she was sent out. Shang Lan was somewhat worried, moreover, this to and fro would definitely take some time. Young lady's youth would also be affected. Ren Wanyan frowned. Yes, Shen Qing was of 16 of age, in another year, she would be 17. In Ding capital, it would be just the right time for females to be married, but Shen Qing was an official's daughter and naturally would pick noble families. By waiting one more year, she was afraid that all the better nobilities would be picked by others. Yuan can only rush back after the end of the year, but now Qing body cannot be dragged on. A trace of hostility flashed on Ren Wanyan's brow. Fern, Kaiju, who was standing at the side, who kept quiet all along, suddenly spoke. This servant heard that Vice Minister of the Legislative Bureau's Wei Fern is recently close with third Fern, and has intention to seek a marriage for Wei family's eldest son and have requested for fifth young lady. Shen Miao. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth. She is really lucky. The Vice Minister of the Legislative Bureau was a fourth-ranking official. Even though it was considered to be overestimating one's capabilities aiming towards the daughter of a first-ranking official like Shen Qin, the eldest son of the Wei family was a youth with superior talents and looks. To marry an idiotic female in the Ding capital, at least in the aspect of talents, he is worthy enough for Shen Miao. Moreover, Wei Qing had already entered the official circle at a young age, and in the future would definitely be a successful youth, thus Shen Miao really hit the jackpot with this request of marriage. Heard that the Wei family is interested in clinging on to this residence. Kai said, so they bore the pain and used their son as an opportunity to build a good relationship with Shen residents. The meaning of Kaiju's words were indicating that Shen Miao was an inferior person and not worthy of that young master Wei. Can considered it as her being lucky. Ren Wanyan's expression was somewhat hideous. In these years, although Shen Qin's rank was high, there was practically no one who came over to the Shen residence to talk about marriage, and it was all because Shen Miao was too foolish and weak. With Shen Qin's achievements, Shen Miao's future husband would definitely be from high-ranking families, but in those families, it was impossible for them to accept such a matriarch who was a laughingstock in Mingqi. So even with Shen Qin's many meritorious service, nobody showed any interest in Shen Miao. Now with the Wei family suddenly coming over to propose a marriage, even though Kaiju mentioned about climbing up the ladder, if one were to think carefully, it was because of that day in the academy examinations, Shen Miao's performance was so refreshing and because of the change from that original stupid image, that made the Wei family could not help but take action. Even it was usual, Ren Wanyan would also not tolerate to have such a good marriage proposal falling onto Shen Miao's lap. Not to mention Shen Qing was in such a condition now, she could not stand to see Shen Miao, the originator, to be better off. Fern need not worry, Shang Lan said, old Fern would definitely not agree with this marriage. In the general's residence, old Shen Fern bore the brunt for the hate on the first household. Since nothing can be done with Shen Qin, old Shen Fern could secretly control Shen Miao's marriage in the palm of her hands. Previously due to Ren Wanyan's management, Shen Miao's idiot reputation was well known all over Mingqi, but now Shen Miao had shed off the foolish title. If someone come over with a marriage proposal, with old Shen Fern's ill intention, she would definitely find ways to dispel their thoughts. With her kind of worthless life, how can there be such a luck in it? Afraid that after marrying shortly, she would die. Ren Wanyan's words were endlessly vicious. She looked at the doors that were shut tightly. Shen Qing was still in the room, unwilling to see anyone, thus a trace of resentment flared in her heart, but Master actually still hoped for Qing'er to marry to that person. Shen Gui still did not know about Shen Qing's pregnancy and Ren Wanyan did not intend to tell him. Shen Gui, this kind of person who took relationships lightly, to Shen Qing who recently lost her innocence he could barely tolerate her now. But if he were to know about Shen Qing's pregnancy, he would definitely disregard Shen Qing's health and force her to abort the baby. But even so, Shen Gui was afraid that the matter would be exposed and even urged Ren Wanyan to search a marriage for Shen Qing, as long as Shen Qing was able to marry over quickly and the other's family was of high rank. After picking around, they choose the supervisor of the minor treasurer's youngest son, Huang Dexing. The Huang family was considered to be higher in rank than the Wei family and naturally would be bathed in glory and wealth. But as compared to the Wei family, the Huang family's master and ferns were not people who were easy to deal with and Huang Dexing was a cut-sleeve person who liked men. Cut sleeves meant homosexuality, originating from the history of Western Han when Emperor Han Ida was in bed with his lover Dong Xian and had to attend a court audience that morning. Not wishing to awaken Dong Xian, who was sleeping with his head resting on the emperor's long robe sleeve, the emperor used a knife to cut off the lower half of his sleeve. It was because of that the Huang family was not very concerned about picking a daughter-in-law. As long as the daughter-in-law temperament was gentle and would close an eye on Huang Dexing's indiscretions, they did not care about other stuff. Shen Gui thought that since Shen Qing's body was already dirty, it would be better to marry to the Huang family since Huang Dexing was not interested in females and would not touch Shen Qing. Naturally this secret would not be discovered. Shen Qing only need to have the Huang family's daughter-in-law's name and enjoy the wealth and splendor. And Shi Gui could also rely on the Huang family's marriage and relationship and raise his career up another level. Shen Gui naturally thought it was a good idea but Ren Wanyan did not comply. Even if Shen Qing's body was dirty, in Ren Wanyan's heart, she would still search for a good marriage for Shen Qing. Marrying to Huang Dexing was like living the life of a widow and she would definitely not use her daughter for this marriage. Because of this matter, Shen Gui and Ren Wanyan had already argued for a long time. The couple's relationship was already cold and now was even worse. Shen Gui almost never stepped into Kai Yunyuan and spent all the time in the concubine's courtyard. It would be best if only fifth young lady and eldest young lady were exchanged. Kai Ju said resentfully. The speaker had no particular intention but the listener read more meaning into it. When Ren Wanyan heard what was spoken, her brows jumped and she suddenly looked towards Kai Ju. What did you say? Kai Ju jumped in shock and stammered. This servant said that if fifth young lady and second young lady marriage partners were exchanged, it would be best. You said correctly. Ren Wanyan stood up suddenly and her face suddenly changed to a state of ecstasy as she said, exactly, as long as Qing'er's and that little slut's marriage are exchanged, she mumbled, it should be my Qing'er's. This time let that little slut suffer the consequences of her actions. As she said, she suddenly thought about something, bring my cloak over and head to Rong Jingtang. Would ever Fern go to Rong Jingtang for? Kai Ji and Xianglan was very confused with Ren Wanyan's sudden actions. But they only saw Ren Wanyan grinning, naturally to get old Fern to keep the good marriage proposal of the Wei family. In the winter day, the sunlight shone onto the plants at the windowsill and reflected the color light green. Even though daylight was extremely thin, it seemed as if it could break through if one was inattentive. Shen Miao was wearing a twin butterfly's dress with a purple embroidered robe around her. The dark purple made her already fair skin seem transparent, and her pair of eyes were as clean as a fresh painting. Even by standing at the window without moving, the air of nobility came out lingered around her body. Bai Lu and Shuangzhong looked in a somewhat daze. Even them, who had served Shen Miao for so many years and had seen Shen Miao's face for so many years, did not know why when they see Shen Miao now, there would be a feeling of unrecognition. That light magnificence appeared on this childlike young lady and became awe-inspiring, and immaturity had become somber and desolate. Young lady seems to like wearing lotus purple clothes. Bai Lu said, even though it looks good but commonly at this age, do not young ladies like brighter colors like pink and blue? Lotus purple was a solemn and royal color, and unmarried young ladies other than the princesses in the palace would rarely wear such colors. First, it was easy to look elderly. Second, it was difficult to bear this color as it was easy to look like a child who wore adult's clothes. But Shen Miao undoubtedly had a tender little face but had an air and attitude of a palace lady wearing the clothes, making the maids puzzled. Even though Bai Lu and Shuangzhong lowered their voices, Shen Miao could listen to all of it. She smiled gently. Why did she like to wear lotus purple? It was most probably because this color could constantly remind her to be calm, reserved and to not be soft-hearted and hesitant. When she was living in the palace, she would wear the empress's attire every day and that gold color was able to deter those palace concubines with sinister motives. She carried an air of an empress and made others refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases, but that color was really not suitable for her. She married young to Fu Shuyi and had experienced many things that others at her age would not have. It was because of that her innocent and foolish character was finally ground to a pool of stagnant and placid water. Afterwards, she fought for favor with Mei Fern in the inner palace so that she could protect Fu Ming and Wan Yu. She also wanted to protect that brilliant yellow empress's attire but ultimately did not have anything left. Evil purple took away the luster of vermilion. It implied going against one's higher-ups and usurping the power. To often wear purple in this lifetime would imply that there would be a day that she would snatch over the power that the imperial family of Mingqi was constantly thinking about and step all over on those bandits and robbers. But Shen Miao suddenly thought of a handsome youth who always wore purple. Evil purple took away the luster of vermilion. Those below would mess up the top, but one did not know how about that unpredictable and mysterious eldest son of the Xie family. Would he also have the intention of usurping the power? Young lady, it is not good. Just as she was pondering, Jing Jie rushed in from outside and said, Young lady, Mo Qing had gotten news from Chun Dao that vice minister of the legislative bureau's Wei family came over to propose marriage, and old Shen Fern had accepted the Wei family's card. Shuangzhong frowned as she asked, such a hurry. Whose marriage did the Wei family propose? It is young lady. Jing Jie anxiously stomped her feet. That Wei family situation was still not clear. How can old Fern not ask young lady's intention before accepting the card? Master and Fern do not know about it. This is obviously using coercion. Shuangzhong all the while had held old Shen Fern in contempt and naturally knew that old Shen Fern's actions would definitely not be good for Shen Miao. It was unclear if that Wei family was a good family, since old Shen Fern would not let Shen Miao live her life easily. Young lady, what can be done? This time, one must definitely write a letter to Master in haste. Bai Lu's expression exposed the anxiousness she had. The maids in the room were busy beating their heads and scorching their brows but only Shen Miao was silent. After a moment, she lightly laughed under the surprised eyes of the maids and only said, this is really odd. Even though the vice minister of the legislative bureau is a fourth-ranking official, the Wei family's financial situation is substantial and the Wei family's eldest son, Wei Qian is also a talent. For grandmother to let such a good thing to land on my head, it made me feel flattered. Young lady, Bai Lu was surprised. Young lady finds that Wei family good. More than good, Shen Miao lightly said, if father returns and know that there is such a marriage proposal, there would not be any reason to refuse. For a young lady in an official family, Wei Qian is considered to be a husband worthy to entrust one's life with. How does young lady know? Jing Jie asked unconvincingly. Shen Miao was in the residence all day and even if she did go out, she only went to Guangwentang. As for the family circumstances for whichever official family and nature of these sons, there was no logic to how she would know about it. But the way it was spoken, she seemed to be very familiar with that person, which made Jing Jie puzzled. As for an unmarried female like Shen Miao, she naturally did not know which family's son would be a good husband. But as Empress Shen, she knew clearly by heart which family's juniors has talents and characters. Wei Qian was indeed a good talent and his character was considered upright. It was Wei family who came to propose marriage and Shen Miao would not believe in any way that old Shen Furen would agree to this marriage. Just at this moment, Gu Yu ran in from outside with a somewhat bewildered look. Young lady, Rong Jingtang's Shear came over to pass old Furen's words to quickly take a trip to Rong Jingtang. The actions are really fast indeed. Shen Miao's eyes became slits and she smiled, then let us go over to take a look. In Rong Jingtang. Shen Yuanbo snuggled up against old Furen's side. These days Ren Wanyan was busy taking care of Shen Qing and simply left Shen Yuanbo in Rong Jingtang. Old Shen Furen had originally showed tender affection for this grandson and naturally he was incredibly precious to her. Thus she treated Ren Wanyan much better. Chen Ruchu and Shen Yu were actually not there. After Ren Wanyan started to take care of Shen Qing, Chen Ruchu temporarily took over the role of the matriarch of the family, and naturally the task of being the Shen family's representative to entertain other Furens fell on her. This kind of opportunity Chen Ruchu would naturally not let it go, and would bring Shen Yu out for social interactions every day, as she wanted to expose Shen Yu to the various noble Furens so that it would be more favorable for Shen Yu's future marriage. Ren Wanyan stood at the side of the main hall, seemingly thinking about something. When Shen Miao was brought into Rong Jingtang by old Shen Furen's maid, she greeted old Shen Furen. These days she was confined and had to copy Buddhist scriptures and knelt in the Shen ancestral hall. Old Shen Furen did not want to see her so she did not let her come over for greetings. The last time she saw old Shen Furen was before the confinement. Fifth girl, is one's heart tranquil after copying Buddhist scriptures? Old Shen Furen asked. Upon hearing this old woman's erudite words, Shen Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. If one were to say that Shen residence's elderly were not respectful, old Shen Furen would be the first to bear the brunt and why would she say such words of tranquility? She smiled gently, as grandmother wished. Then that is good. Old Shen Furen pretended to cough and she quickly brought over the hot tea. After opening the teacup cover for a sip, she looked at Shen Miao and said, that matter previously, even though it was not your fault, it was caused by you, moreover your temper is overtly stubborn. I only punished you with copying Buddhist scriptures. Do you have any complaints about me in your heart? Shen Miao does not dare. I know you are sensible. Old Shen Furen looked at her in satisfaction. Since you are this sensible and also the young lady of our Shen family, naturally I will dote on you. It seems that you have reached the age of marriage. As vice minister of the legislative bureau's Wei family came over to propose marriage for the son of the Wei family. They proposed for you. Do you think it is good? If this was not the time to do so, Shen Miao would have really laughed out loud. Old Shen Furen, such a person, most likely only recognized this small dusty land. How would an elder in the family go ask one's grandchild loudly, do you think it is good? Really could not understand what old Shen Furen was thinking. The orders of the parents are the promises of the matchmakers. Shen Miao smiled and said, naturally father and mother would need to worry about this granddaughter's marriage. This girl, old Shen Furen saw that she was tactfully rebuffed, she almost burst in anger. Hearing the soft reminder cough from Ren Wanyan, she slowly adopted a calm look and said, this girl is truly too headstrong. Originally you were in love with. Let that be. Now seeing that in these past days, things are cleared up and thought that you are aware of the propriety. This vice minister of the legislative bureau's family is considered to be well matched in terms of social status and that Wei family young master, Wei Qian, also have a magnificent bearing and is a literary and military genius. Even your father would not have half a disagreement with this proposal. This is the first time such a person came over to propose since your birth. If one would not grab the opportunity, that young master from Wei family would become someone else's husband in a turn of a head. Although old Shen Furen was not befitting as an elder but her matchmaking skills were not bad. Most likely because she was a songstress, she knew that young ladies would be fond of looks and she described Wei Qian as an ideal husband for everyone. Although Shen Miao knew that what old Shen Furen said was not a lie as that Wei Qian was indeed a good man. Despite this, Shen Miao was still unmoved and lightly said, young master Wei is rather good but is still not what I wish for, so grandmother should let it pass. My marriage naturally would be decided upon by father and mother. You. After being contradicted repeatedly, old Shen Furen, who did not have patience, finally got angry. You are criticizing that this grandmother is intervening in your marriage and stretched my hands too long. This granddaughter did not say that. The unspoken implication was that she said it herself. Old Shen Furen was so angry she could almost go crazy. Now the arrogance and obstinateness of Shen Miao was out in full force, as though she was covered all over with thorns and one could not touch, which made one feel pain from holding the anger in. Old Shen Furen hated the first household but also feared Shen Xin. Even after so many years there was still anger in her heart, but she managed to held it in and even though she was not close with Shen Miao, put on a serious but impartial grandmother impression. She cannot beat up Shen Miao because Shen Xin would discover and would at the most reprimand a few words. She had coldly looked on as Ren Wanyan and Chen Ruchu raised Shen Miao as a wastrel causing her to fail due to excessive praise. Even though there was much said but there were few things that were discovered. At the end, for unknown reasons there was one day when that wastrel Shen Miao suddenly became clever and not only that, her temperament became unreadable. She angrily said, do you still have any respect for seniority? Shen Miao felt that it was boring. This kind of patience and determination of old Shen Furen, if she was thrown into the inner palace, she would definitely not live more than 2 days. In her past life, she had seen too many powerful females and then there is old Shen Furen, with this kind of short-sightedness who does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Shen Miao really did not take her into consideration. I ask you again. Old Shen Furen still remembered the purpose today and asked Shen Miao heavily, do you agree to this marriage proposal? I do not agree. Shen Miao answered. Good, good, good. After saying good 3 times, Fu Er and she quickly approached old Shen Furen and stroked her heart so that she would not faint in anger. Old Shen Furen was so angry that she laughed. That being the case, it seems that you do not really regret your actions. From today onwards, you will move out of your courtyard and stay in the Shen family's ancestral hall to chant scriptures every day. Let's see if this can grind your unyielding temperament down. To stay in the ancestral hall and face the ancestors' tablets daily was considered very fearful for a small delicate girl. Moreover, the grounds of the ancestral hall were cold and if one were to stay a few days, one would definitely get sick. Old Shen Furen said those words in a fit of anger and looked at Shen Miao complacently as she was most likely waiting for Shen Miao to beg for mercy. But Shen Miao did not even wrinkle her brows when she answered, yes. This granddaughter will go and pack things up now and immediately head there. This fluttering sentence made old Shen Furen almost fall back in anger. And after Shen Miao spoke that sentence, she really said her goodbyes to old Shen Furen and left immediately. This bastard daughter, no laws in her eyes. Old Shen Furen was exasperated in anger and because she was low-born and unable to say literary phrases, she used words the poor would use, little slut. Deserved to have that old slut's blood. The old slut she was speaking about was naturally the real mother of Shen Qin and Shen Miao's blood grandmother. Ren Wanyan raised her head and looked darkly towards the door, but Shen Miao's figure was no longer there. Did not you say that she would definitely agree with the matter? Old Shen Furen directed the anger towards Ren Wanyan. She being like that, how is it an agreement? Now what can be done? Not to say that old Shen Furen was puzzled, Ren Wanyan also felt it was strange. With Wei Qian's conditions, it would be even difficult for Shen Qing to be unshakable. But Shen Miao actually rejected without even thinking or considering. She mumbled, it must be that she has her heart still set on Prince Ding, thus on the surface she pretended not to care but in reality did not give up. Else for this kind of person, she would definitely not refuse. She was not even shy like other females who would be when they heard about their marriage. Now what to do? Old Shen Furen said snappily, if she does not relent here, how to write the letter to Shen Qin? Originally in both of their plans, as long as Shen Miao was coaxed, they would let Shen Miao write a letter to Shen Qin indicating her interest. Afterwards when Shen Qin returned to the capital, it would be easier to arrange the marriage and then substituting a raccoon for the crown prince Chinese proverbs by switching the brides of the two marriages. Afterwards placing all the fault onto Shen Miao, and once a female got married, there would be no more disposition. Even though Shen Miao would be scared, she would not dare to make a big deal out of it. Shen Qin would not know that Shen Miao's and Shen Qing's marriages were exchanged, and would thought that Shen Miao was in love with the young master of the Huang family. Huang Dexing preferred men, and this matter was only known to people who were close with the Huang family. To the public, Huang Dexing was a good catch. But now Shen Miao herself showed dissatisfaction with the Wei family's marriage proposal and did not write a letter to Shen Qin. Shen Miao was not agreeing to it, and now there were a number of plans behind that were not able to be carried out and created unwanted trouble. Since soft methods failed and hard tactics were deployed, Ren Wanyan ferociously said, did not mother lock her up in the ancestral hall? Then whatever outside hears would be what we say. In short, the marriage proposal have to be settled as soon as possible, quickly conduct the marriage and change it to Qing'er. Otherwise, even if the wedding night could be deceived, Shen Qing's abdomen cannot be hidden. Taken advantage that nothing can be seen from Shen Qing, it must be quickly finished. Old Shen Furen looked at Ren Wanyan and did not speak. Although she really wanted the first household to land in misfortune, but if hard tactics were used and when Shen Qin found out about it, she will be implicated and would have to receive the consequences. With one look Ren Wanyan knew what was old Shen Furen's thoughts. She gritted her teeth and said, Mother, do not worry. I have plans after the events and it would not be investigated till mother's end. Words were already said to that level so old Shen Furen did not carry on. She said, then do as you have said. In Bai Walu, with the Sizu's music lingering, there was a handsome youth clad in purple walking slowly in the elevated pavilion, as if he was the shimmering light above the ninth heavens. His eyelashes were very long and that pair of peach blossoms eyes were exceptionally pretty, but when they were looking at others, it revealed a faintly discernible indifference and cruelty. A light cough broke the silence in the pavilion, and a gentleman clad with fine robes holding a fan across his chest made a gesture for forgiveness, pardon the lateness. You also know how to be late. Really refreshing. The purple-clad youth glanced at him. Su Mingfeng touched his nose. This good friend most hated people who were not punctual, and thanks to his friendship with him, else if it was others, Xie Jingxing would have brushed his sleeves and leave, and would not have waited for the time of a stick of incense. Actually, Wei Qian was out of norm today. Su Mingfeng laughed bitterly. You are also acquainted with the young master of Vice Minister of the Legislative Bureau's family. He is rather pitiful. He already have someone that he liked, but unexpectedly his family proposed marriage to another young lady and the other side also accepted his card. It would seem that this marriage would be set to stone quickly. Wei Qian was not in a good mood, so he pulled me to drink. Su Mingfeng pointed to himself, but since I am now seriously ill, I cannot drink and only console for half a shichen. Boring, Xie Jingxing said with a cold face. Obviously Su Mingfeng had spent such a long time to do just a senseless thing and he was very unhappy for having to wait for such a long time. Su Mingfeng felt helpless. Xie Jingxin was one who despised worldly conventions and there was always a smile on his face, but in reality holds a grudge well and was particularly picky. Not sure what had happened for these few days, his mood was also indifferent. Whenever Xie Jingxing looked at people this calmly, Su Mingfeng would feel all his hair stand on ends. In fact, Wei Qian has really bad luck. The wife that his family chose for him was an idiot and was well known in Mingqi for chasing Prince Ding. For Wei Qian to marry her, it was really helpless of him. He quickly changed the subject hoping that it would arouse Xie Jingxing's interest. You should know who is she, right? Shen Qin's daughter, Shen Miao. To be able to marry to Wei Qian, it could be considered as a great fortune. You are saying, Xie Jingxing suddenly opened his mouth and asked slowly, Shen Miao. Shen Miao. Exactly. Su Mingfeng was somewhat surprised of Xie Jingxing's attitude. He suddenly remembered something and mischievously laughed. Is not she the young lady that you saved during the academy examination? So to say, she has some courage and was not too ugly. Wei Qian, this kid is actually living in plenty without appreciating it. He saw that Xie Jingxing was deep in thought and could not help but be surprised. Hey, could it be that you really fancy that young lady? Xie Jingxing sneered and he swept a look at Su Mingfeng. You are very idle. Of course I am idle. Su Mingfeng frowned. I am now seriously ill and cannot go to court and resort to play with cats and dogs in the residence. You also do not often appear and are very close to that position, Yao Yang. Are you keeping some things from me? It was said that the friendship that one made Wen Yang was not shallow, but as one grew up Xie Jingxing became very mysterious. Although he had reminded him on the matter of the Su family, but towards Xie Jingxing, Su Mingfeng did not know anything at all. Xie Jingxing threw a fruit to him, just eat it. Obviously he was not going to continue this conversation, and Su Mingfeng's eyes flashed and a trace of a bitter smile showed in his lips but he did not say anything. Not too long after the Shen family received the Wei family card, Ren Wanyan also let Shan Lan invite Shen Gui over to Kai Yun Yuan. After Shen Qing's matter, there was a rift between the relationship of Shen Gui and Ren Wanyan, and both of them did not talk at all. These days the relationship was as cold as ice. This time Ren Wanyan took the initiative to take the soft approach. Shan Lan and Kai Ju simultaneously entered to greet Shen Gui, and Ren Wanyan sat in front of the table with somewhat melancholic eyes. What is it with you this time? Shen Gui's tone was still very harsh. In the beginning because of Shen Qing, Ren Wanyan scolded him ruthlessly and it made Shen Gui